across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Are you sitting comfortably? Then I shall begin. Top of the morning, happy Sunday, one and all. Mark Dolan and a very big Talk breakfast to come. The full English is on its way. Or should I say, the full Scottish. Congratulations, Scotland, who have beat Haiti 1-0. After decades of pain and after a long time away from the World Cup, the Scots have got the 3 points. And they're currently making a lot more progress than Nicola Sturgeon's camper van. Come on, Scotland! England next. Let's bring it home, shall we? But the World Cup brings only a temporary respite from the political turmoil. Breaking this morning, feel the burn! Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham is poised to ask Keir Starmer to leave office if he wins the Makerfield by-election. With a clear message from the Greater Manchester Mayor, on your bike, Sir Keir. But is Andy Burnham the answer for Britain? Meanwhile, Nigel Farage has revealed he will evict foreign nationals from social housing, will bring reaction. And as a new Defence Secretary is appointed, can Labour be trusted with Britain's national security? Do you feel safe under Labour? And yesterday on the show, we brought the breaking news that the former leader of Advance UK, one of the most prominent voices on the political right in this country, Ben Habib, said a deal can be done between Restore, Reform and the Conservatives. So my question to you this morning is a simple one. Should Kemi, Rupert and Nigel do a deal to save Britain? What do you think about that? Should the right unite? Should Kemi, Rupert and Nigel hammer out a deal to save this country? Is that the dream team? Rupert, Kemi and Nige? I'm not even kidding. They mostly think the same things. It's just egos, isn't it? And political brands. What do we need to do? We need to get taxes down so we can have national growth. We need cheap energy. We need to build, baby, build and drill, baby, drill. We need border control. We need to stop the boats. It's not complicated. Nigel, Kemi and Rupert all want that. Why don't they hammer out a deal? 0344 499 1000. Or is it Nigel all the way? Is that the only way you're going to get proper change? I think a lot of you quite like Kemi, but will never trust the Tories again. 0344 499 1000 is my phone number. The brilliant Rory is taking your calls today. What a star he is. Back in his very silky summer shirt. He's very elegant, is our Rory. Blessed with natural good looks. The rest of the team have personality. That's important as well. Of course, I'm joking. They're all smoking hot, especially Phil Dave. I'd like to thank him for a fantastic hour. Really enjoy this idea, Phil, of an early breakfast show. The papers, opinion, a bit of wits. I think that was a home run, if you ask me. So my thanks to Phil Dave for the last hour, and he's in charge. He's the executive producer of today's output. Dean was going to be here, but he was at the Wetherspoons yesterday afternoon, and he texted me saying, look, I'm just hydrating because it's very, very, very humid at the moment in the capital. So you say very focused on hydrating at the Spoons. He's still there, folks. So we've got a great executive producer. Directing our TV output is the future of broadcasting. This guy's on the radio, and he's also a technical wizard. and he's a brain box as well. Luke is directing our output, so you can hear us on the radio, but you can actually see us. This is a TV show, and I know my onions about the telly because I have been in television broadcasting for 2.5 decades, and I'm back. So if you want to watch the show, see Dolan's Dispatch, which might get me cancelled today. I hope it does, actually. I want to get cancelled because it's only when you get cancelled that you've said the truth, isn't it? In some ways, if I do a Dolan's Dispatch, I don't get cancelled, then I've failed you because I haven't told the truth. Because that's what happens now. The truth gets you cancelled. And I've got to say, I've got no worries about the technical aspect of today's show. It's going to be a technical masterclass because our lead engineer is Dave Rhodes, who is, I've got to say, the most in-demand person in the building. And if you're new to the show, I just want to bring you, he's the guy who presses the buttons, makes all the amazing music beds and everything. He's the technical guru of the show and of the channel. And there's competition for Dave Rhodes' services. He's effectively News UK's Sir George Martin, OK? And there's a hideous tug of love going on at the moment between myself and talkSPORT, which is our sister station. I normally wish them goodwill. I think they're doing a good job on the World Cup. But that relationship has turned sour because they want Dave and I want Dave. So Adrian Durham wants Dave, but I want Dave. Jeff Stelling wants Dave, but I want Dave. Ray Parlour wants Dave, but I want Dave. And let me tell you, I always get my man. So what we've got is I've got showdown talks with Adrian Durham, Ray Parlour and Jeff Stelling after the World Cup over drinks. And let's just say, without being overly egocentric, my will shall prevail. So there you go. We've got the dream team, but I can't do it without you. So what do you think about this? Should there be a coalition of the right? Should Kemi, Rupert and Nigel hammer out a deal to save Britain? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk, Let's Talk. Christina has messaged the show. Good morning, Mark. Reform UK all the way for me. We don't need the Tories or Restore. Don't trust them one bit. Reform UK are more professional and the other two would want control. How about this from Richard in Leicester? Good morning, Mark. What's happening with the 17-year-old girl stabbed in the neck by a Pakistani man? Not on the front pages. Richard, I shall come to that scandal very shortly. Are we sick to the back teeth of British citizens being stabbed on the streets, being mown down by cars, being subjected to machete attacks? Are you sick of it? Because I am mightily sick of it. And I've actually written a column for The Express, which comes out tomorrow. And I've said, look, the authorities can now no longer deny a clear, proven link between rising immigration and rising crime. I'm so sorry, but the facts don't care about your feelings. I am 52 and I was born in 1974. And let me tell you that in the 80s, we didn't open the papers every morning and find out about machete attacks, acid attacks, people being mown down by cars used as a weapon. We didn't have armed cops at Christmas markets. We didn't have what are laughably called diversity barriers. You know, those massive concrete barriers in our city centres now, which are there so that people cannot drive a vehicle into the public. We didn't have that in the 60s, the 70s and the 80s. But by God, we've got it now. Front pages, Sunday Telegraph. Jarvis, I will get the forces the funds they need. This is the new Defence Secretary, who has said the government must meet the moment on military spending. Wouldn't it be funny if Dan Jarvis resigns tomorrow? Because how has he got this Midas touch to get the money for the military that John Healey couldn't get? John Healey, one of the most respected politicians, not just within the Labour Party, actually within the country. A rare figure on the left, admired and respected across the House of Commons, across the political spectrum. Healey couldn't get the money. A Starmer loyalist, a bag carrier for Sir Keir, no less, couldn't get the cash. So how and why Jarvis will get it is anyone's guess. It's a hot mess, isn't it? I mean, it's not complicated. Running the country, they need to keep law and order on the streets, provide public services funded by taxation, and border control / military. That's it. That's the job of the government. And we give them half of our money to do that. And Dave, don't be getting to me with, well, I think you'll find it's 27% the threshold and then it's 31. No, Dave, let me help you with this. Because yes, some people are on the lower rate of tax and then you got that. Forget about that. Forget about it. Can I explain? By the time you've put petrol in your car, by the time you've purchased a Mars bar or a Snickers, which I think we should start calling Marathon again. Remember Marathon, David? They tasted better, Phil Dave. The Marathon tasted better. Don't be giving me this, that the recipe didn't change. The Marathon tasted better than the Snickers. Anyhow, but by the time you've filled up your car with petrol, by the time you've purchased some food from the supermarket for which you've had to take out a mortgage, you actually are paying 50% of your tax. And I'll tell you for why, because of VAT. You see, everything is taxed. You've got the road tax, and then the goods that you purchase are taxed 20%. So by the time you've earned your money and then you pay your actual tax, then there are the stealth taxes. It brings it up to about 50%. Most people, and of course, don't forget the ultimate tax, which is inflation. Did you know that? Guys, inflation is a tax because what happens is two things, right? The government print money, so that reduces the value of money, that causes inflation. And they do inflation-busting pay rises in the public sector, such as tube drivers on 70 or 80 grand a year to press a button. You heard me right. So you've got the inflation-busting pay, you've got inflationary policies, welfare, all of that, printing money. So inflation is ultimately a tax on us all because it reduces the value of our wage packet and it increases the cost of goods. So between inflation and VAT and the taxes on petrol and the taxes on energy and the subsidies for the green crap, you are actually, half of your money is what you're keeping if you are lucky. And then if you're in the upper end, Phil Dave, people earning 100 grand a year, well, I think that they're probably keeping about 30% of their money. And when they buy a property, they have the stamp duty. The list goes on. It's absolutely wild, which is why wealth creators are leaving the country. And the left don't seem to understand that that's a problem. There was a very woke journalist at the Times newspaper, which is a great paper, but there was a woke journalist there, and she wrote a piece. And it said, millionaires are leaving Britain, good riddance. That is how insanely, majestically stupid these people are. And what she didn't seem to understand on her lovely fat cat salary writing for the Times, because it's a very successful newspaper, and they make money. It's a great brand. It's actually probably my favourite broadsheet brand. I love the Times. But with her fat salary, and she writes an article saying, the millionaires are leaving Britain, good riddance. She doesn't seem to understand, because she has 1.5 brain cells, that if rich people leave, then the taxes that they were paying when they were here will now have to be paid by you and me. Because you see, they've gone, but the bills are still there for the NHS and policing and fixing potholes when they can be bothered. The left don't understand that if rich people leave, we're all poorer. And I think in some ways they want that so they can crash the economy and have an emergency budget. Farage pledges to evict foreign nationals from council houses, say the Sunday Telegraph. Sunday Express, 100,000 failed asylum seekers are still here. What a shambles. Welcome to Broken Britain. Sunday Mirror, vow to readers, Burnham, I'll make us heard. The Sunday Mirror I consider to be pathetic, because for 2 years now they've been gaslighting us about Keir Starmer with, you know, Keir's got a plan, Keir's going to smash the gangs, Keir's going to go for growth, Keir's going to bring your energy bills down. The Sunday Mirror is a rag. It is the in-house newsletter of the Labour Party. And we've had 2 years of them pretending that everything's going swimmingly and Starmer's doing a great job. Most of their energy is focused on Nigel Farage's bank balance. Who cares? Nigel Farage could be a trillionaire for all I care. If he can stop the boats, give us cheap energy, bring down taxes so we can have national income, create a cohesive multi-ethnic society based around British values, and if he can stop the machete attacks and get rid of the need for concrete barriers in our cities, then I'll be happy. I don't care about the bank balance of our politicians. And anyway, Starmer is a multimillionaire himself, so who are they to talk? This is a guy, Starmer is so rich, and he won't pay for his own spectacles and his own suits. These people are horrendous. They're not great human beings, if you ask me. So what about this? Vow to readers, Burnham, I'll make us heard, with a picture of Andy Burnham punching his fist, looking like he's got conviction. This guy has got more flip-flops than Sports Direct, Dave. He was going to, oh, I feel really sorry for the waspy women, you know, I'm going to pay them out. Oh, is it £77 billion? I won't do that. We'll give them vouchers for a sandwich at Greg's. So now what you can see, just briefly before the break, you can see that Andy Burnham is now the poster boy for the Sunday Mirror. They've moved on from Sir Keir Starmer, who they've spent 10 years telling us is great, and they've got their new guy. And the whole thing is a you-know-what show, isn't it? And Burnham, by the way, will be worse. I keep dropping you these tidbits. I've spoken to one of the biggest figures in politics, and I cannot tell you any more because it's all embargoed. But I've done a sit-down interview with one of the very biggest names in politics, and they've said that when he becomes Prime Minister, which he probably will, he'll be found out in, wait for it, 48 hours. A leading political figure has said he'll have 2 days, and then it will be total meltdown. And I'm sure that's right. Folks, what do you think about this? Should there be a coalition of the right? Should Kemi, Rupert and Nigel do a deal to save Britain? 0344 499 1000. Your calls, texts and voice notes next, plus a titan of broadcasting. Don't go anywhere.
We've got some breaking news that has just come in. talkSPORT have announced a brand new partnership in a developing story. We hear they've created So Good Lager right in time for football's big summer. Just in, we're hearing that So Good Lager will be pouring pints across all O'Neill's pubs and some of the best sports pubs across the UK. With the big kickoff just around the corner, you can find out where to get your hands on a fresh pint of So Good Lager at talksport.com/lager.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast. It is 6:22. Should Kemi, Rupert and Nigel do a deal to save Britain? Should there be a coalition of the right? Well, how about this from Yvonne? Good morning, Yvonne. What a beautiful name that is. It's a French name, isn't it? Bonjour, Yvonne. Yvonne says, good morning, Mark. I do think that the right should unite. It may be a little rocky, but hopefully they will settle. I like Kemi, but it's those behind her that are the problem. Hopefully the wet Tories will defect to the Lib Dems where they belong. Rachel has also messaged the show. Good morning, Rachel. Can I just say that the people listening and watching at 6:22 a.m., you guys are the elite of Talk Breakfast. You are the creme de la creme, the A squad. So can I just welcome you to this very special grouping? And Rachel is one such person. Good morning, Mark. The right should unite, but Rupert Lowe is far too right. He's too extreme for the mainstream public. He's a fly in the ointment of reform, but not fit for government. Simon in Durham, good morning, Mark. Sounds like a broken record this morning. The right are not uniting. Here's my prediction. Burnham wins Makerfield. He then at some stage becomes Labour leader. Things get worse. Things shift towards restore. Reform turn to dust. Tories already in the dust. Well, for reaction is a man that knows the political right very well and have spent quite a lot of time working with Nigel Farage. It is broadcasting legend Duncan Barts. Good morning, Duncan.
Morning, Mark.
So good to see you. Welcome to Talk Breakfast. Well, that's the million-dollar question. Should Kemi, Rupert and Nigel hammer out a deal to save Britain?
You'd like to hope that they would be capable of doing so, but I don't think the mood music's particularly suggesting that that could happen. I mean, I feel, and we often talk about this on Talk, and you and I have spoken about this on a Sunday morning in the past, it feels like 5 minutes to midnight in this country.
Yeah.
Everything feels like it's right on the cliff edge. And if Andy Burnham gets in on Thursday in the by-election and then replaces Keir Starmer, we will see what I believe will be socialism on steroids in Downing Street, right? This
wow.
guy...
Socialism on steroids. Yeah. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
This guy, I don't think he knows anything else but actually just spend, spend, spend. He was on late night telly. I'm not going to mention the programme, but he was on being interviewed by a female presenter and he was asked to explain the fiscal rules, right? And he said, I'm not going to sit an exam on the fiscal rules. And it's just like, do you know what they are? Do you have any... That is his weak spot. He doesn't understand basic economics, all right? And it's in the DNA of most Labour politicians I've ever come across and ever interviewed, is they don't understand that you should not be spending more money unless you've got it coming in.
It's not in their DNA to balance the books.
No. It's always spend, spend, spend. And, Mrs Thatcher made... I can't quote it word for word, but she made the point. The problem with socialism is they run out of other people's money, right? And this is the problem we've got. So in order to try and stop Burnham going into Downing Street, you would hope that there would be some kind of agreement on this by-election on Thursday, but there is no agreement. And going forward, I think there's more likely of a coalition of left-of-centre parties at the next general election than there'll ever be a coalition of right-of-centre parties. And I think this for a couple of reasons. Look, Farage and Lowe hate each other. There's no other way of dressing this up. They despise each other. I've interviewed Rupert Lowe a couple of times on a podcast I do with the Taxpayers Alliance. Not in the last few months. I interviewed him when he was a Reform MP and then when he was an independent MP and had set up Restore Britain as a movement, not as a political party. And he's an interesting bloke. He's got some ideas and stuff, but he despises Nigel Farage. And I can't see the two of them ever coming to any kind of agreement.
Does their hatred for each other trump the national interest? Do you think Rupert Lowe would knowingly allow a left-wing coalition to win the next election in order to do a number over Nigel?
Yeah.
Well, that's damning, isn't it? Because
I believe
if that's true, if that's true, Dunks,
yep,
then Rupert cannot call himself a patriot.
No, I mean, I'd like to think otherwise, but everything that I'm seeing and hearing, and he was at Makerfield yesterday, Rupert Lowe, and he addressed a group of people. Some people called it a rally. I'd call it a gathering of people. I mean, and I used to do spinning politics. And it's just kind of like, it's just very clear that I think what's driving him is ultimately this idea of making life as difficult as possible for reform. What I will say, though, and I don't want to upset any reform supporters who may be listening, but I will say this. I think it's a bit cheeky if you're a reform supporter saying, well, Rupert Lowe should stand his candidate down because otherwise Burnham's going to get in. You could make the argument that if reform hadn't stood so many candidates in 2024, we wouldn't have Starmer in Downing Street. There are dozens of Tory MPs who lost their seats because Reform fielded a candidate. So I think you have to be a little bit cheeky to go, oh, well, you know, it's not fair, you shouldn't be doing this, because Reform 2 years ago effectively did the same. However, I come back to the point I made earlier, it does feel like it's 5 minutes to midnight in this country, and if Burnham goes into Downing Street, I think we'll all have to head to the airport.
That's exactly right. Will the last person to leave Britain remember to switch the lights off? Yeah. Our brilliant chief digital producer, Porrick, cut this clip yesterday of Ben Habib speaking to me on Talk Breakfast, saying a deal can be done. It was quite surprising. Let's take a listen if we can.
When it comes to 2028, when we've established what the solutions are, when we've had this fight, we've debated it, and we've got to those solutions, then Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage, if he's still in position, and indeed Kemi Badenoch, if she's at the table, have to be grown up, and they've got to sit round a table and make sure they get a thumping majority one way or another on a collective ticket which delivers this country back to safety. And there will be no greater proponent for that taking place than myself. We will put lots and lots of pressure on people to make sure that that happens.
Well, there you go. I believe the frost is starting to thaw a little on the political right. And I do wonder whether what's going to happen, Duncan, is that Restore will make their point at Makerfield and Labour win the seat. But when an election approaches and the national interest comes into consideration, I think at some point they begin to talk.
I hope so. I mean, I'll make the point again. I'm desperately keen for a coalition on the right because it will stop something ghastly going on in Downing Street in the future after next general election. At the moment, though, it does look like you're more likely to have a coalition of Labour, Lib Dem and the Greens, a socialist, a rainbow coalition in Downing Street than anything on the right or centre where people join forces and go, listen, we need to put our egos to one side because there's a lot of ego going on there. We need to put our differences to one side for the future. And it is the future of this country, Mark.
Well, it really is. And you're right to focus on that. And actually, Labour and the Greens and the Lib Dems, they're not ideologically compatible, but they will be united around one enemy, and that will be Nigel Farage. And as you said, this coalition on the left will happen overnight because they will be motivated to keep Nigel Farage out of number 10, and that will hold that coalition together. It's all they need, isn't it? One single enemy. What is it? Your enemy's enemy is my friend.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, look, you know, there may well be conversations already taking place, but from what I know and from people I talk to, there's a long way to go before any proper thawing of the ice between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage.
Duncan, where do the public stand on this? Because I also think that voters in Makerfield may well support Restore UK in their numbers. 8, 10, 12% of the vote, which is enough to split the vote on the right and give it to Labour. And I think the reason why those folks are voting Restore is very noble. And I think what they want is no more compromise, no more U-turns, no more watering down of policies. They want red meat. They want full-fat Coca-Cola. They want true conservatism. I think that's why they're backing Rupert. I don't think they're racists. I don't think they're reactionaries. I don't think they're mad. Because if you read Rupert Lowe's remarks, his posts on X, I agree, don't know about you, with the vast majority of it. He talks sense. And I think but I think it'll change at the election because I think the public have got common sense and they'll think, look, we do want undiluted conservatism. We want the full-fat Coke. But at an election, Rupert ain't going to become PM, at which point I believe that the Restore folk will weigh in behind Nigel.
So you think Makerfield, anyone who's voting Restore predominantly is doing it out of protest to send a message?
Correct. I think that people have always done this. It was ever thus at by-elections, sending a message and having a protest.
That's what happened with Gorton and Denton, can't you? You can argue that was also about sending a message, and that got the Greens another MP. So you may well be right. I think one of the points I just want to pick up on that you made a few moments ago is I think the electorate are utterly hacked off with British politics, OK? People are fed up with it. And the one thing that Restore Britain is doing is it is very consistent. As you say, it's red meat. It's proper right-of-centre red meat. And they're clear with their messaging. The challenge that we've seen with Reform UK in the past, and this is what happens when there's more scrutiny and you're more under the spotlight and you get more MPs. They have flip-flopped a bit on some of their policies.
For sure.
You know, and I think some people just go, oh, hang on a second, I thought you didn't do that kind of thing, which is why I wanted to support you. So maybe they're looking elsewhere.
Well, that's right. And I think the idea is that Restore and previously Advance, led by Ben Habib, can hold Nigel's feet to the fire and keep him true, as it were. But I think that the way people vote, including voters on the right, is different at a general election to local elections or a by-election, because then they know what is at stake. And I think that, for example, the people in Makerfield who vote for Rupert Lowe on Thursday will not vote for Rupert Lowe in 2 or 3 years' time.
And you might be right, because I'm old enough and you're old enough to remember UKIP, right, which was Nigel Farage's first kind of political vehicle. And do you remember that they got 2 MPs because they had 2 people, 2 Tories, who crossed the floor, Douglas Carswell and Mark Reckless?
Yeah.
And both those men, I think I'm right in saying, someone will let me know if I've got this wrong, because I'm doing this on the hoof, I think I'm right in saying both men triggered by-elections and got back in under the UKIP banner, yet only one got back in at the next general election.
Yeah, he's a mesmeric politician, in my view, with a brain the size of a planet. Just briefly, interesting messages from my audience today.
Go on.
And there's an abiding theme about the Conservatives. They like Kemi.
Yeah.
The Tories, not so much.
Yeah, she's got a problem. There's a really interesting piece, and I'm going to see if I can find it. It's either in the Telegraph or the Times, and it's by, here it is, Bernard Jenkin, and he's written this piece. He's the MP, the Tory MP for Harwich and North Essex, a 6-point plan to save the Tories and the nation from endemic decline. And this is almost like a mini manifesto, right? And it's very, very interesting, because Kemi's problem is her personal poll ratings are doing remarkably well. I've been really impressed with her ever since the Conservative Party conference last year in Manchester. I was there. On the eve of it, everyone thought it was basically going to turn into a wake, right? And within 24 hours, 36 hours, after her conference speech, she turned it around. It was a blistering speech.
You had that speech, and then you had the budget response in which she slayed.
Yeah, and over the last several months, Prime Minister's questions, where time and time again she is knocking, you know, Starmer for 6, which is great to see. So she's doing really well. The challenge is you have some great up-and-coming Conservative MPs, people like Katie Lamb and Jack Rankin and Lewis Cocking and stuff, and they're great. They're sound, to use that word, politically right-of-centre sound. The challenge is, dare I say it, all of the old-school Tories of the past 14 years still hanging around who are a little bit wet. And what does she do with them? You know, what does she do?
You are a keen political historian, and you'll remember that Mrs. Thatcher had the same battles with her party. We think of that as a decade of unrelenting power on the part of Mrs. Thatcher, that she commanded that party, you know, steel fist, iron fist. In fact, she spent years. It was only really by about 87 that she defeated the left of her own party.
Yeah,
it took that long.
We have a parallel there, and you know we also have a parallel. You know, Thatcher came in 79. We also have that parallel. If you look at our economy at the moment, you know, you even have former chief economists of the IMF saying it's more than likely that Britain will need to go to the IMF for a bailout sometime in the next few years. You know, that was a story from a couple of days ago. The parallels between where we are now and back in the 1970s, economically and politically, are vast.
The definitive biography of Margaret Thatcher was written by the Observer journalist Hugo Young, and it was called One of Us. And the reason why it was called that is because that was Thatcher's catchphrase for 10 years in power. When discussing colleagues in the party, she would say, "Is he one of us?" And that was, is it somebody that shares our philosophy for change? And, of course, that is the concern. Will Nigel be diluted by clapped-out Tories coming into the party? That is the million-dollar question. Let me give you the candidates for Makerfield. Jake Austin, Lib Dem. Count Bin Face Party. Andy Burnham, the Labour Party. Dan Clark, Libertarian. John Dyer, Independent. Ed Gemmell, Climate Party. Paul Gould, Independent. Alan Howling Loud Hope, official monster raving loony party. Robert Kenyon, Reform UK. Robert Pownall, Protect the Wild. Rebecca Shepherd, Restore Britain. Sarah Wakefield, Green Party. Peter Ward, Rejoin EU. Michael Winstanley, The Conservative Party. Next up, Nigel Farage, has announced if he becomes Prime Minister, he will evict foreign nationals from social housing. Reaction next.
Across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, on your...
I will evict foreign nationals from council house. This is quite a development. Duncan Barks is a broadcaster and journalist. Duncan, your reaction to this, will it go down well with the public?
I think it's quite a hardcore policy here. I mean, one could make the observation that it's been released because obviously we're counting down to the Biden previously talked about, and also maybe it's been put out today in order to kind of just temper restore Britain. And there is a view, I think, that, you know, as you mentioned it earlier, you need some red meat, and Restore have got plenty of red meat when it comes to their policy on deporting people. And here we have Reform UK via a Substack that Nigel Farage is launching this morning. So this is an essay. And if I've understood it correctly, he'll be doing various essays over the next several months, just kind of like outlining the party's policy on various issues. And in this new one, he vowed that veterans and long-term local residents will instead be given priority, along with domestic abuse survivors and care leavers. Foreign nationals living in social housing will be given 3 months to find private accommodation or face being deported under this new reform proposal. So it's an interesting one. It is hard. It is a hard policy. There will be people who think, well, I've had enough of feeling like a second-class citizen in the United Kingdom compared to people who come to this country from elsewhere. I support this policy. I can understand exactly why he's outlined it.
It's amazing, isn't it, that we've allowed that to happen, that people from overseas in their 20s, 30s or 40s receive subsidised housing in the United Kingdom. It's wild when you think about it.
I think it feeds into something we often talk about here on Talk, which is this feeling that we have a two-tier Britain, right? And, you know, we talked about it in the past about justice. Sadly, we've had to talk about it recently with the case of Henry Novak in Southampton and policing. I think there's this feeling from a lot of people in the UK that if you were born here, you almost go to the back of the queue. You're not seen as a priority, and people are fed up with it.
And we'd assumed that was a given, that it would automatically you would prioritise your own people. But that's now a debating point. It's a right-wing dog whistle to put the British people first.
Well, yes, and if you make any observation and you have concerns about the fact that British people do not come first, then you're somehow, as you've just mentioned, labelled as hard right or far right. And that is the left's way of just shutting down any form of debate, isn't it?
Well, I come into the studio, as you do, at the weekend on a Sunday morning, and the security staff do a 13-hour shift on a Sunday.
Yep.
And so they clock off. The particular people on duty will clock off at 8 a.m. 13 hours on your feet, walking around the building, isn't it? Checking things, going through details, organising passes. They've got a lot going on through the night. So therefore, they're not with their families. No. They're going to go to bed. This is not a sub-story, but I just want to put it in context. And people listening to this show who are at the tail end of a night shift or are about to go to work now on a Sunday rather than a beer garden. And their hard-earned cash, half of it is going to go towards a variety of things, including subsidising foreign nationals for their accommodation.
Yep.
It's completely unacceptable.
And
how did we get here?
I think the quick and dirty answer is we got here because...
I like it when you talk dirty.
I know you do. I think I'll say it again. The quick and dirty answer, Mark, is that we have been, as a nation, remarkably tolerant and now over-tolerant.
We've been too nice.
We've been too nice. And
that's our great quality as a nation.
It is. I said this before on Talk. You know, it's come back to bite us on the backside. We have been so tolerant and so welcoming. And sadly, there's a chunk of people in society who have come to this country. And it is a chunk. It's not everyone. You know, let's say this is nuanced. But there are a chunk of people.
In fact, it's probably a small minority.
But I think it's a growing chunk of people because they see other people getting away with it who, frankly, take the mick. And it's like, look, come to this. Look, we have been a great country. We've given sanctuary to people off the back of World War II. You know, thousands, hundreds of thousands of refugees. We have a great track record. We have helped people out. But there are people who have come to this country and they refuse to integrate. They refuse to acknowledge the laws of this country. They feel that they should have certain exemptions when it comes to how they live their lives. And I think we've gone too far the other way, and we've gone, no, we get that, it's fine. You want to do that, you can do that. And for me, the turning point was, do you remember Abu Hamza?
Of course I do.
The guy with the hook.
Or Captain Hook.
Yeah. Who, and this is going back to...
The enemy of metal detectors the world over.
Well, quite. But also the enemy of the general public when he was having prayer meetings outside Finsbury Mosque. Do you remember?
I do.
And streets had to be shut down. And the police had to protect it and police that particular form of worship. And that's going back, what, 25 years?
Correct.
That's when it started to happen. It swung too far the other way. I have no problem with people praying, but do it in your place of worship, do it in your church, do it in your mosque. What gives anyone the right to shut down streets in this country? And we as taxpayers have to police that so it can be allowed to happen. And for me, that was the catalyst of when we started going too far in the other direction and people, frankly, started to take the mick.
Too nice. They've made mugs of all of us. From Steph, good morning, Mark, and hello, Duncan. No foreign nationals should be able to access social housing or benefits. If they can't support themselves, they should not be here. Our own come first. Steph, I completely agree. Can you imagine going to Dubai, China, Singapore? Can you imagine going to the United States and seeking subsidised housing and benefits? Good luck. Peter, good morning, Mark, and hello, Duncan. Foreign nationals should never have gotten social housing in the first place. Plenty of room on disused airfields for those who claim to be refugees, but in reality are mostly just illegal immigrants here for nefarious reasons. Another Peter, how can Rachel Reeves go to the IMF for a bailout and then give it all away to illegal immigrants and overseas aid to countries who hate us? It makes -0 fiscal sense. How about this from Colin? Hey, Mark, the only way we can save this great country is to have a reform government who have the balls to do the right thing. Stop the migrants, kick out those already here, stop overseas funding, reduce the welfare bill, get our military back to full strength again, etc., etc. However, that is just a dream while this rotten Labour crowd are in. They intend to strip this country of its identity for their own means. They're not true Labour, they are traitors. What about this from another Peter? Never forget, Mark, that it was Nigel Farage who fought to keep the pound rather than getting the euro. I recall meeting Nigel at the Bedfordshire Country Show at Redbourne years ago with his pound sign badge. He always was destined to be Prime Minister of this country. Let's take a voice note on housing migrants from Ben.
Morning, Mark. Ben from Birmingham. I'm one of those. I'm now 7 hours into a 12-hour shift minimum. It's my 6th one in a row. Every day I've done 13 or 14 hours. One day I did 12 and a half. Today I'll be the same. I'll have worked over 80 hours by the time I finish.
Wow.
Around midday today this week. And my tax bill probably about 700 quid for the week. And it's going to pay for people that sit on their arses or have just landed on a boat. I really wouldn't mind if it was for Indigenous people that need the help, or it's going towards making the NHS better, or the police better, or the roads better, or anything else other than the crap that they're spending it on. It does my head in. I average over £500 a week in tax on rubbish. Sure, it's going to be a great show.
Well, Ben, you are a hero. That is what my producer, Phil Dave, said. And he's absolutely right. And there are millions of you because you decide to get up early in the morning and go to work. 7 hours into a probable 12-hour shift on a Sunday, this lad. And it's going to be a sunny afternoon. And rather than going to a beer garden, spending time with his friends and family, Ben is going to have to get some kip because he's working so hard. 80 hours a week. Now, Ben is not looking for sympathy. I know that. But he's just pointing out that the tax he pays, which is about £500 a week, which is a lot of money, that, Duncan Barks, doesn't even touch the sides when it comes to what this government does with the money. Illegals, hotel accommodation, HMOs, army barracks used for people that shouldn't be in the country, pocket money and mobile phones, by the way, net zero and subsidies to prop up a collapsed business model. The list goes on.
I can add to this. So I've got a piece in tomorrow's Daily Express. It goes online this evening. I write a Monday column for the Express. Taxation, our taxes go to fund the Home Office, right? My column tomorrow is the fact that the Public Accounts Committee, which published a report several days ago, is made up of a group of MPs right across the political spectrum, so all different political parties, have concluded, as a result of their report into asylum, we have asylum seekers who have failed in their asylum application in this country, but nobody knows where they are. And this is where our taxes are going. This is where our taxes are going.
Welcome to Broken Britain. Well, we need to cover that because it links to the front page of the Sunday Express. 100,000 failed asylum seekers still in Britain. Lots more to come. Your voice notes, your reaction. Should the Rights form a coalition to keep Labour out of power? Lots to get through. Talk Breakfast, 6:49.
We've got some breaking news that has just come in. talkSPORT have announced a brand new partnership in a developing story. We hear they've created So Good Lager right in time for football's big summer. Just in, we're hearing that So Good Lager will be pouring pints across all O'Neill's pubs and some of the best sports pubs across the UK. With the big kickoff just around the corner, you can find out where to get your hands on a fresh pint of So Good Lager at talksport.com/lager.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
6:51 Talk Breakfast. How do we fix this broken country of ours? Here is a voice note from Peter.
Good morning, Mark. Yes, this country is in real trouble because of the politicians, including all those from Tony Blair onwards up to this absolute loser of a loser of losers, Mr. Starmer, Mr. Feathers the Penguin. You know, where, again, we hear nothing all of a sudden about Henry Novak. That's gone quiet. Where are all these famous people, film stars, pop stars, all the others that come out gobbing it off when it's someone of colour, that gets murdered? Where are all these people that come out and take the knee for poor Henry Novak?
Yeah.
Nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. As a white man, a white English man, I think our situation is very precarious in this country. And even if worse, if some people are Jewish, I think there's an awful lot of trouble coming unless it's knocked on the head right now. Anyway, don't spill anything down that nice old pink shirt this morning, Mark.
Happy that you're watching. If you want to see my controversial shirt, head to YouTube, search Talking Up We Pop. Here's a voice note from Nick. Do you think that Kemi, Rupert and Nigel should hammer out a deal to save Britain? Take a listen to this.
Good morning, Mark. It's Nick from Loughborough. I don't think we'll see a coalition of the right. I don't think we'll see them come together, because today's politicians are ego-driven, pure and simple, power and ego. And I include all of them in that. Starmer, Badenoch, Farage, Rupert Lowe, the whole damn lot of them. And all they're interested in is power. And their way of thinking is underwritten by the fact that they're all rich enough to live with a socialist government. It will never affect them. They don't care. Have a good day.
Thank you for that, Nick. They don't have skin in the game, do they? Rory says, Mark, please stop including Badenoch, or Bad Enoch, as you call her, in the coalition. The Tories are not right-wing. We will never learn. Enjoying the show. Comme d'habitude. Thank you, Rory, for that bit of French as well. Francis in Sussex. Great show, Mark. No, Nigel should carry on with reform. Why should they do a deal with Restore? The Tories hope they will do a deal because they are toast. So no, says Francis. I will vote reform, says Dean in Ealing. I want nothing to do with the vainglorious Rupert and his merry band of racists. I want nothing to do with a party that thinks Zia Yusuf, Suella and others should not be here. They disgust me. Rupert will blow up soon. His supporters will be exposed. Paul in Exeter. Rupert Lowe can afford to leave the country when the balloon goes up. And Steve in Northants. Reform helped the Tories when Boris got in and got no thanks whatsoever. And Duncan, I was talking about tax because there's this idea that some people pay the lower rate, other people are on the higher rate. I think that most people wind up parting with half of their pay packet by the time you include inflation and VAT. Filling up your car with petrol, that's taxed. And this from Ella. Mark, don't forget, we even pay VAT to wipe our bums.
We do.
20% VAT on toilet paper. Make it make sense. Brilliant messages. Just picking up on this story before you get to another scandal. Sunday Express, you're writing about this in the Express tomorrow.
Yeah, so the front page of the Sunday Express, 100,000 failed asylum seekers still here.
100,000 people?
Yeah, these are people looking at the story that the Home Office and the government have failed to port.
So we've said, the authorities said, you shouldn't be here, but they still are.
Correct. What I've written about in tomorrow's Express, online later today, are the asylum seekers, and these are people we know about. OK, so the front page of the Express, 100,000 people who have failed, but we haven't done anything about them. But we know they're still here. That's why that story is there. There are asylum seekers in this country who have failed the asylum process. They exhausted the process, but the Home Office have lost track of them. And we know this because the Public Accounts Committee, made up of various MPs, held an evidence-gathering session, and the Home Office was asked. They were asked various questions. They issued a statement, and this is the quote, OK? We know where the, quote, vast majority, quote unquote.
Oh, that's reassuring, isn't it?
Of failed asylum seekers are. The Home Office doesn't publish any figures regarding people they've lost track of, right? But we do know 2 years ago, back in 2024, ministers admitted there were at least 5,000 failed asylum seekers that they've completely lost track of. Now, my hunch would be that figure's probably increased. How can it be, with the massive amount of tax that we pay in one of the most monitored countries in the world, all right? And let me just riff on this quickly. CCTV, ANPR cameras, facial recognition technology, all of this kind of stuff.
All the ULEZ cameras, there's cameras everywhere.
These people who have been in the asylum system. We know who they are, right? We know who they are. We've got records of them. They've had asylum cases. How can it be they simply disappear and the Home Office goes, oh, well, we only know where the vast majority are? It's a dereliction of duty.
Well, it is, and I'm so glad you also questioned the figure of 100,000, because I know my audience will be saying, and the rest.
Yeah, and it is a problem, and I'll tell you why I think it's a problem. These are the ones we know about, front page of the Sunday Express. Those who we don't know where they are. Sadly, we have seen in the last couple of weeks that we have people who come from other countries and other cultures who live here who don't share the same values as us, OK? They don't.
No.
It's a fact. So consequently, if you're someone who has been told you're not going to be given asylum in the United Kingdom, we need to know who these people are, right?
Well,
because they may
absolutely.
well bear a grudge.
Correct. They wish ill on the country if we're saying bugger off. And the other issue is, have they failed asylum because they have a criminal record or some other blot on their copybook? It's a completely broken system, and it is a scandal. And, you know, overall, do you know what it is? I would say it's taking the sheesh.
It is. It's very good.
And you got a bit of a story on that.
Yeah, I have. This is in the Sun on Sunday today. And I had to read this. Sometimes, Mark, you read something once, you go, that can't be true. So you read it a second time. I've read it 3 times, and it appears... Well, do you think you need to be a skilled worker to create a kebab?
No, I don't think you do.
I mean, I think you could train, you could train a donkey if given enough time to probably, sort you out with sheesh. So it transpires in the Sun on Sunday that skilled work visa licences have been given to 159 kebab shops.
This is ridiculous.
This allows people to come to this country and bring their families as well, so it's not just an individual. In order to say, I can come to the UK because I've got a skilled work visa because I know how to cut a bit of meat off the old, what I call the elephant leg rotating in your kebab shop.
I mean, this is a fraud on the British people, isn't it?
Yep.
This is a con trick, because when we hear skilled immigration, we're thinking gas engineers.
We're told it's doctors and scientists and engineers. Yeah, all of that jazz.
Sparks,
chippies.
Good luck with that.
All of that jazz. So there you are. And I mean, I'm sure you could find people in this country who would quite like to work in the kebab shop.
Well, there's 10 million adults of working age not active in the economy. Luckily, you are super active in the economy, Duncan, and you're going to stay with us, which is very exciting. Just on the kebab, do you ever eat that elephant leg thing?
No.
No.
I have a proper chicken quiche, which are the cubes on the skewer on the charcoal.
I like to see the meat in its original format.
Yes, because I know what it is.
What's with the elephant leg?
Dodgy.
You know what that is? That's about being like, 8 Stellas in.
It is.
Starts to become attractive.
Anything's attractive after 8
happens with the
Stellas.
opposite sex, doesn't it? Didn't happen with Mrs. Dolan. There were no beer goggles there. I had 20/20 vision. Lots more to come. This is Talk Breakfast.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Two minutes past 7. Top of the morning, welcome to Talk Breakfast. Mark Dolan with a big Sunday morning show for you. Lovely to have your company, whatever you're up to. You may be at the tail end of a shift. We've got Ben's just messaged the show with a voice note, and he's 7 hours into a 12-hour shift. So whatever you're up to, you may be working, you may be slumbering under the duvet. Perhaps you're getting ready to mow the lawn. Perhaps you're pacing yourself before a trip to the pub for a Sunday afternoon beverage or two. But whatever you're up to, we've got your back. And let me tell you some big stories to get through. Breaking this morning, Feel the Burn. Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham is poised to chuck Keir Starmer out of number 10 if he wins the Makerfield by-election. But is Burnham really the answer for Britain? Meanwhile, Nigel Farage has revealed he will evict foreign nationals from social housing if he becomes Prime Minister. And a new Defence Secretary is appointed. But can Labour be trusted with Britain's national security? And our question this morning is a simple one. Should there be a coalition of the political right? Should Kemi, Rupert and Nigel do a deal to save Britain? 0344 499 1000. Rory is taking your calls. So give him a call, pick up that phone. Rory, here's what I've got to say. Dave the engineer is pressing the buttons. Our executive producer is the double threat of broadcaster and media guru Phil Dave. And directing our TV output, the brilliant Luke, the wizard that is Luke. And so all you got to do if you want to see the show, watch Dolan's Dispatch, see my studio guests right now, and take a view on my rather controversial pink shirts. It's not for everyone. Terry Wogan once said, "You're not going to please everyone, and that's okay." Well, that's my life motto. So directing our TV output is Luke. If you want to see the show, head over to YouTube, search Talk, and up we pop. Let's talk. Should there be a coalition of the right? Do Kemi, Nigel and Rupert need to put aside their differences and do a deal to save Britain? Let me give you some front pages. Sunday Express, 100,000 failed asylum seekers still in the United Kingdom. Welcome to broken Britain. The Sun on Sunday, World Cup heist shock. England kit rescued as 2 nicked for van raid. What a save is the headline. Sunday Mirror, who seem to be backing Burnham now for Prime Minister, vow to readers, Burnham, I will make us heard, with a photograph of a very forthright, fist-wielding Andy Burnham on the front page of that paper. Sunday Telegraph, Jarvis, I will get forces to the funds that they need. New Defence Secretary says government must meet moments on military spending. And Nigel Farage pledges to evict foreign nationals from council houses. Reacting to the big stories of the day, live in the studio, 2 very good friends of mine, broadcaster Duncan Barks and political commentator Charlie Rowley. Good morning, boys.
Morning.
Good morning.
Charlie, great to see you. And what a story, what a splash Nigel Farage has made. He's no stranger to a headline, is he? This one's going to get people talking. Evicting foreign nationals from social housing. Your reaction?
Well, I think most people would get along with that, especially when you have people in this country who've served this country, veterans, for example, that haven't had the accommodation, that haven't had the social housing, that they should probably be afforded. I don't think that's a controversial statement at all. If you've put on that uniform, if you've served your country, if you've put your life on the line for this country and you can't get social housing in this country, then what on earth is it for?
And there's another problem, isn't there? Because not only is it, I think, the misuse of our taxes to accommodate people from overseas, and I don't mean that in an incredibly prejudicial or xenophobic way, Charlie, because if I went to Singapore or if I went to the United Arab Emirates or even the United States, I would not expect my housing to be subsidised. So I think that's not unreasonable. But the other issue you've got is it increases rents for Brits.
Yeah.
Because if you're filling up social housing with folk from overseas, what's going to happen to the private market? It's going to go up.
Absolutely. The demand for social housing, the demand for all housing is obviously up. So when you sort of take a lot of that supply away and offer it to people that have come to the country for whatever reason, then you're limiting that pool that is available to people that actually might need it here. And it's about fairness. We hear all the time about immigration, about legal routes of people coming into this country. That is something that can happen. We did this exactly for Ukraine. We've done it for the Hong Kongians. We've done it for Afghanistan, people from Afghanistan, a country that we did have a bit of a hand in. So, people might want to forget that, but that's the fact of it. So you've got to help certain groups of people where the UK has had an involvement and where we want to help. And so you can, but you do that through the planning. So if you say to people, right, or to people in the UK, we can help Ukrainians. And of course we want to do that. They're a European partner, they're a European ally. So then you go away and you think, right, how much social housing have we got? What stock have we got available to help to provide for those people that are genuinely fleeing a war-torn country at the hands of a despicable Russia? But we can pick and choose. We can choose the countries that we feel as though that we can help, or where we've intervened in the past where we have a duty to help. But we can't just open the doors to anyone and everybody to say, it's all right, come to the UK, we've got a generous benefit system, and here's a house
but
to help
that's
you.
what's happened, hasn't it, over the last, blimey, I don't know, since, 1997, I would argue? Since Blair got into government, the New Labour project, we have been more than welcoming to pretty much everybody. And Charlie, you're absolutely bang on the money. There are people from certain countries who actually, I believe we're responsible for helping them out, fleeing Ukraine or indeed other countries around the world. But the problem we have is we've now ended up in a situation, and you see these banners sometimes, don't you, and these placards, all refugees welcome, and it's like we can't afford to do that anymore. Okay, I'm sorry to break it to you. How do you think this is all paid for? And what is interesting about all of this is the default setting, particularly anyone on the left of the political spectrum, is simply these people are fleeing persecution or some form of, tyranny from whichever country they're coming from. And it's like, are all of them really fleeing some kind of persecution? And there are dozens of incidents and cases and stories out there that we've talked about here on Talk where people have, all of a sudden, you can't deport me because I've just realised I'm gay. And it's just like, oh, come on, really? And I think people are sick and tired of it.
Most definitely, or I don't like chicken nuggets.
Well, there's that story as well.
That's a big one. By the way, something just personally happened to me about a month ago. A late-night trip to Mackie D's, other outlets are available, and a long hike back to my budget hotel with my chicken McNuggets, hugely looking forward. Requested barbecue sauce. No barbecue sauce in the bag.
Tragic.
It's an outrage.
Bad things happen to people in life, but I don't think it gets much worse than that.
I mean, Britain is broken, isn't it? On the back of that. No barbecue sauce and a late-night takeaway. This country's gone down the pan.
I actually don't think that they can be eaten without the barbecue sauce. I think it's impossible. I've got to tell you that there's another elephant in the room, and we talked about refugees, and it's interesting how the left, I think, have overplayed their card, Charlie, because now the idea of asylum seeker is like a dirty word. So what we've done is we've brought into disrepute the very principle of a refugee, which is the fault of the left with open borders, because prior to overplaying their hand, no one had an issue with folk seeking refuge in this country. But when it's millions, and as Duncan has said, they're not all fleeing persecution, well, then the public say no more. It backfires horribly. But there is a small matter of millions of EU citizens who are enjoying subsidised housing in the UK. Now, I wish these people no ill. Mrs. Dolan happens to be of a German extraction herself, but that's not the basis for subsidised housing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And look, people feel as though we have been generous for a long time. And rightly so, we're a generous nation. But when the left have nothing else now to do but double down on the rhetoric of anybody that that we might say has come into this country, well, people that have come in, the facts are people come into this country illegally. They have crossed on a small boat. They have been put up in accommodation, whether it's hotel accommodation or now
half of whom will stay forever, by the way.
Exactly.
People don't realise that.
Absolutely. It is perfectly legitimate and right and just common sense to say, OK, those people should not be able to say, but the left have got nothing else to do apart from double down on the rhetoric to say, no, you want to get rid of them,
Yeah.
you're far right,
Absolutely.
you're racist. They've got nothing else left to do but sling those labels around and sling the mud at people who are just trying to get back to a pragmatic situation where we have certain housing for people that we can help and should help. And actually, if you come into this country illegally and you've got no right or basis to be here, then I'm afraid you're out.
And you used the word fairness earlier, and you're absolutely right. People, the British people have a massive sense of fair play and fairness. It's one of the great British attributes. And the problem we have here is that people now are seeing that their sense of fair play is being increasingly abused. And the thing is, if someone does cross the channel on a small boat and enters this country illegally, I think all of us around this table will agree that people just go, hang on a second, because then you're being rewarded for actually doing something wrong. You've effectively broken into this country and you are getting accommodation and you're getting this and you're getting that. And people have just had enough, particularly against a backdrop of a lot of public services in this country just simply not working anymore. And the sense that if you are a refugee or asylum seeker, you go to the front of the queue, yet the person who broke into this country, as I say, goes to the front of the queue, but the person who's paying the taxes in this country, i.e. us and talk listeners and viewers and stuff, they kind of lose out a little bit and maybe go to the back of the queue. And people are just going, this is just unfair. I've had enough.
And these people aren't, unsmart. These are smart cookies. They see Britain as, why people ask the question all the time. Well, people have got to France before they come to the UK, for example. Well, why do they come to the UK? Because they're reading the headlines and understanding that benefits Britain and our welfare bill is obviously a lot more generous than what you might get in France. Or when you talked about European countries, just in a slightly different sort of point. But, people don't want to settle in Europe because they know that they can come to the UK, they won't be deported. The Rwanda scheme was scrapped. It didn't have a chance to get off the ground. Pardon the pun. But, it should have done. The Prime Minister back in the day, Rishi Sunak, should have just driven that through to say, right, I'll deal with the legal consequences afterwards. But one nation has got a signed deal, the UK, with Rwanda, an independent government. We will see through that deal. And that might have stopped some of the pull factor. But you're seeing more of a pull factor when you don't have the deterrence and you've got a generous benefits scheme. Just on the point about the European nations, and you talked about European housing, post-Brexit, I find it extraordinary people say, well, Brexit is to blame and it's all the UK's fault. Well, this takes two to tango, and, people will be looking towards their summer holidays, just as an example of the relationship between the UK and the EU. We were very clear in the UK that we weren't going to punish citizens. We wanted to stop free movement, and that's one thing, and people would understand that, and I think that's just a common sense approach. But when it comes to holidays, for example, we were never going to say to our European neighbours and friends, you can't now come through the e-gate system. The EU made it incredibly difficult for Brits. It was the EU punishing the UK, not the other way around. So I think when people sort of bemoan Brexit, and then Brexit has brought all of these woes to this country, and as if it was sort of, silly little Englanders that voted for Brexit, and actually we should be, looking to rejoin the EU, even when now we would have worse terms, spend more money on it, and have less of a say.
And lose the pound.
Because
they will not have us back in.
Exactly.
With the pound, it'll be you have to sign up to the euro. So with the prospect of Starmer where he is at the moment, possibly out of a job in the next couple of weeks, Burnham coming in, who's just rode back a little bit at the moment on his we must rejoin the EU, guaranteed.
I wonder why.
Yeah. Maybe he wants to just get some votes. But I mean, but once he's in Downing Street, of course, he'll revert to type, and it's just like, and what really hacks me off about anyone who's part of this government or a Labour politician or a Labour supporter, they think all of this country's ills will be sorted out if we rejoin the European Union. Yep. And it won't, because despite Rachel Reeves's best interests managing our economy or mismanaging our economy, we're still predicted to grow faster than France and Germany. And what do they have in common? Oh, they're part of the EU. Yeah. So this idea that all of a sudden, we just rejoin the EU and everything will be rosy in the garden again, frankly, is for the birds.
Absolutely.
It most definitely is. Duncan, loved having you in the studio.
Always a pleasure, gents.
Look forward to you coming back and presenting some shows. Both of you turned out to be outstanding.
I think we got away with it, Charlie.
Yes.
So back here Wednesday, Thursday and Friday of next week in the evenings.
Looking forward to that. Cannot have me too much Barks or indeed too much Rowley and
or too much Charlie.
Continue. Well,
I'm the only Charlie you need.
Yeah.
On this
that's definitely
morning.
a problem in this industry. Look at engineer Dave. He hasn't blinked since he sat down. Keeps going to the toilet.
Starstruck, obviously.
Yeah, starstruck. That's just his weak bladder. Brilliant. Duncan, look forward to the shows next week. We'll catch up very soon. I'm delighted to say that Charlie Rowley is going to stay with us. And on this show yesterday, we broke the news that Ben Habib, former leader of Advance UK, one of the most prominent right-wing voices in the country, has said that a deal can be made between the major parties of the right to save Britain. So should there be a coalition of the right? Well, Charlie is very well connected, former advisor to a Conservative government minister. We'll get his reaction next. It's 7:17. This is Talk Breakfast.
We've got some breaking news that has just come in. talkSPORT have announced a brand new partnership and a developing story. We hear they've created So Good Lager right in time for football's big summer. Just in, we're hearing that So Good Lager will be pouring pints across all O'Neill's pubs and some of the best sports pubs across the UK. With the big kickoff just around the corner, you can find out where to get your hands on a fresh pint of So Good Lager at talksport.com/lager.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Louise in Ipswich. Good morning, Mark. I don't think your guest Charlie should be proud about us letting in people from Afghanistan. They are from an alien culture. Hong Kong, yes. We had no responsibility for Ukraine. It's all about opinions. This from Joanna in Salisbury. I had a bit of a disaster a month ago. Chicken nuggets, no barbecue sauce in the bag. What are you going to do? Joanna says there's a reason for no barbecue sauce that will probably disappear off the menu. Ingredients: barbecue sauce, Worcestershire sauce made with anchovies, animal-derived broths or alcohol. That conflict with religious dietary laws like halal or kosher or vegetarian will be the problem. Thank you for that, Joanna. Now, we broke a bit of a story yesterday because Ben Habib, one of the most prominent figures on the political right, told me on Talk Breakfast that a deal can be hammered out between Kemi Badenoch, Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe to save Britain. Charlie Rowley, your reaction?
Well, I'm not entirely sure that that is the case today, unless, there are some dual conversations going on behind the scenes between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage, for example. But not according to the newspapers this morning. I think that relationship still needs quite a lot of repairing.
Lots of my audience say, actually, take the Tories out of that mix because they're not truly right-wing. What would you say to that?
Well, look, they're on a journey, and, they have...
the road to hell?
They... well, Kemi Badenoch would hope that she is pulling them back to where they need to be.
She's a bat out of hell, isn't
she? She is. And she's polling better than I think a lot of people might have expected. She is polling better than the party, for sure. Now, I think what the trouble that she will always have is that the Tories were in power for the last 14 years, and a lot of the issues that we talk about day in, day out, are at the responsibility of the last Tory government. They didn't get a grip of immigration, legal or illegal. They didn't bring taxes down. Crime seemed to be out of control. That's when we had all these increases in things like, police not doing the things that we should be policing the streets, not tweets and all the rest of it. So, they've got a lot to answer for. They took their eye off the ball, frankly, because of so many other things going on. Brexit being one, very time-consuming, and, that should have been sorted a lot quicker, and not having an internal party dispute over the way in which Brexit should be delivered. And then COVID, which obviously wiped out an awful lot of time and energy in order to respond to a health pandemic. Well, all the while, civil servants, maybe of a particular different view, it's not for me to speculate, or maybe it is, that pushing their own agenda, not having that ministerial oversight, where actually, hard-working, proper Conservatives would have said, no, we're not having that, or no, we haven't got the time for that. These things sort of slip through the net. So, the Tories have got a journey to go on to display to the public that they are Conservative again, if the public are going to take them seriously as a proper Conservative party once more. Kemi is doing that work. Is it going to be enough by the next general election? We don't know. Probably not. But, let's see. Politics is a volatile beast at the minute.
Most definitely. Well, is that Tory journey a cul-de-sac? Martin is in the capital. Good morning, Martin. You're live with Charlie Rowley.
Morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm really well. Great to have your call. What do you think about this? Do you like the idea of Kemi, Rupert and Nigel getting together, maybe over drinks, and hammering out a deal?
I absolutely do not. And the reason for that is, well, firstly, I don't mind Kemi Badenoch, but I don't like her party. But as a reform voter, I wouldn't touch Rupert Lowe and his merry band of racists with a 100-foot barge pole. If you look at some of the people that are behind Rupert Lowe's party, they are beyond the pale. I mean, the only gap in politics that they're filling right now is the gap that the BNP used to fill. I mean, they are a vile, nasty bunch of racists. And I hate to use the R word because as a reform voter, I'm used to people on the left throwing that at me.
Yeah.
But I have to be honest. The evidence is there for anybody that have got eyes. You only need to look at the front page of the Daily Mail today that have exposed Rupert Lowe's party for what they are. It's all there in black and white.
So therefore, you don't want any kind of deal at all. This is the front page of the Mail on Sunday. Restore activists at White Supremacy Summit.
No, and that basically, and I suspect there's going to be more coming their way because for a party that's only polling at about 3% nationally, which is what Restore Britain are, they're getting a lot of coverage, and that's largely because of Elon Musk promoting them. And at some point, it's almost inevitable that Elon Musk will have a big flare-up with Rupert Lowe. And as soon as that happens, as soon as Elon Musk says he no longer supports Rupert Lowe, bang, the whole thing will go up in smoke. And
because what we know, don't we, Martin, is that, of course, Elon fell out with Donald Trump after heading up the Doge department. Martin, one defence to make of Restore UK, is it possible that, like Reform and maybe back in the day Tories, that you will get a few extremist nutters within the party ranks, but that's no representation of the leadership?
That is fair to a point. Although with Rupert Lowe, I seem to remember just before he got turfed out of Reform, he wanted mass deportations of people that were actually born in Britain. And if you
is that true? Is that true, Martin?
That is true. That is true. And it's also, if you look at some of your great colleague Alex Phillips, who I really like, just have a look at the abuse that she's been getting on social media. in the last few months because of an interview she did with 2 Restore Britain activists on her evening show, where those 2 Restore Britain activists came on, made complete fools of themselves, and she's taken the brunt of that. And even Layla Cunningham, she's been getting lots of racist abuse as well, and that's all been coming from people that, if you look on their timelines on social media, all endorse Restore Britain. It's all there for people to go and see. And as a Reform voter, I wouldn't touch them with a barge pole.
Martin, thank you for that. What a great call and a very interesting call. Your reaction, Charlie Rowley?
Well, there's a few things in there, and I actually tend to agree with Martin in an awful lot of what he said. You can like, for example, you get the Tory bit out of the way. You can like Kenny, but don't trust the party. I think a lot of people feel that, so I agree with him there. But also, I think it is fascinating that you're right. Rupert Lowe is someone who I think is articulate. I think he's someone that has called a lot of things out that need to be called out in this country. He's a former chairman. He's a professional, right? He's been a chair of a football club in this country. He's a businessman. He knows what he wants to say. He knows how to cut through. He knows how to hold civil servants, as he has done, to account. He was given a place on I think it's the Public Accounts Committee, a committee, one of the many that we have in Parliament, but he was given that seat because the Tories gave up theirs in order for him to sit in it. So there is a bit of a deal between the Tories and Rupert Lowe there. There's often a conversation about Rupert Lowe joining the Tories, which is are we
supposed to, then how do we square that he's far right, but he's also in the pocket of the Tories? That makes no sense.
Absolutely, and that's the conundrum, and that's the problem that the Tories have, because they're obviously gunning for reform. And Nigel, they see him as obviously the person that said, I want to destroy the Tory party, so they've got their sort of opposition, but yet giving up, it's playing, frankly, they're all playing a bit of a game, which is quite dangerous, because you've got to realise, I think, what Ben is saying, at the end of the day, when it comes to the next general election, the choice will be very clear. Do you want a Labour or a rainbow coalition of all the others, the Lib Dems, the Greens, the Zach Polanskis, goodness knows what else as part of that coalition, or do you want a centre-right government of people that might have different views? Some might be a bit tougher than others, but broadly, what direction of the country do you want it to take? Is it more tax, more spend, more borrowing, more regulation, more red tape, more people leaving the country who can actually generate and create wealth? Or do you want someone that is going to get on top of immigration, cut taxes, cut red tape and bureaucracy, allow inward investment into this country, retain and attract, more business people, more millionaires to be able to sort of set up their own business, to employ more people, to let business flourish in order to have that growth in the economy that we can all share in, to pay for our public services? That's the direction that people will have the choice.
Before I get to Nigel in Edinburgh, Rupert Lowe's not a racist man, is he?
I don't believe he is, no, but I do think that I agree with Martin in what he said, and what's clearly covered in the papers. There are people that are supporting Restore who have been very clear, and we've allowed the debate to become sort of normalised, and that's only because, and the debate that is normalised that I'm talking about is where people are talking about Britishness and Englishness, and if you don't have a heritage which happens to be white, then somehow you are less British than someone that is clearly born in this country in the, today, or even 10 years ago, or even 20 years ago. That, people in Restore will say that they do not have as much a connection because of their ancestral heritage compared to maybe you or I.
I think
that is wrong. That is clearly wrong.
It is. Ethno-nationalism is not going to fly because we have a multi-ethnic society.
Yes.
And that will not be changed. I'm an Irishman, so that probably makes me ethnic to a certain extent. All Jews are ethnic, and of course we've been a multi-ethnic society right back to the 1950s.
Precisely.
Not on the scale of recent times, but that's what we are, and I think that is the concern,
and
that's being expressed.
You're absolutely right, and we are absolutely, that is the right word. We are a multi-ethnic society. We've lived in a multicultural society. We've been told multicultural, but I think this is where again Kemi does poll well, because she's actually making the case we're not multicultural. Actually, we don't want multiple cultures of people. You can be multi-ethnic, you can be Jewish, you can be black, you can can be Asian, you can be gay, you can be, not that that's an ethnicity, but you can be...
What, are you talking about me? That sounds like a very busy afternoon. I'm exhausted just thinking about it.
But we can have a whole layer...
I might end the day with gay, because I'll keep the fun bit for last.
You know, you can be a multi-ethnic or have a different sort of, whatever it is that you are or wherever you've come from. But it is being British is fundamental. That is the point. People forget that it's about being British. The culture that we have, obeying by our laws, obeying by our rules, signing up to our unwritten contracts to be British. That is what gets people's goats going. If you come into this country and you bring a different culture with you, which means that you think you can have however many wives or you can treat women differently or whatever it is, then that is fundamentally wrong. So multicultural, no, but multi-ethnic, signing up to our British culture and British values is just how we are and who we are, and that's why we are great. And that's what should remain.
Charlie, before you go, do you think that things will change at the election? Because I suspect that at Makerfield, what you're going to have is, to a degree, a protest vote. So I think that Andy Burnham is likely to win it. I do think Reform will dilute the... Restore will dilute the Reform vote and gift it to Burnham. But do you think that voters on the right will vote differently at a general election when they know they're choosing the next government?
Well, I would hope so.
I don't think people protest at general elections.
No, you're right. And I think, look, but this should be a clear choice, in my view, between Reform and Labour. You know, the Labour Party are taking, I think, everybody, not just the people of Makerfield, but everybody for fools, because, you know, they're trying to parachute someone in that is not even an MP who is going to go on to become the next Prime Minister. That's outrageous, in my view. But there we are. But there is a lot of anger in this country for a good reason, because of all the problems that we have, and therefore people are turning to people who feel that they have the absolute solution, the absolute perfect solution. But in this case, if you try and make the perfect sometimes the enemy of the good, and I don't actually, I mean, I think, well, people don't need to know my views. I'm not in Makerfield, so I'm not a voter, so I'm not going to preach about what I think. But I think the choice is just very clear between Labour and Reform. If Restore do take away the votes from Reform, that would be disappointing for Reform. I think it would be disappointing for the people of Makerfield that would actually have a local MP as opposed to someone that's going to just swan in to try and run the country. But it might be helpful in the long term, because it will just cement the message that a vote for Reform, at least, a vote for any other party in any constituency during a general election risks letting Labour in through the back door, and you end up with a left-wing sort of borderline socialist government. So just to finish on that, I think that it will be very clear, and it would always be a reference point for Reform in order to use in the general election. But I don't think there should be any deals before an election, I have to say. I think there will be, I would hope, I would like to think, an unwritten rule that if you are sitting in Conservative HQ, you're not going to necessarily, you might put up a candidate, but you're not going to throw any money at all in a constituency that you know you're not going to win, and you would probably allow Reform, you know, with a wink and a nudge, no conversation, no deals, no backroom, you know, handshakes between the parties, but you can just see. Everyone can see the same polling. It might be slightly different for different parties, depending on how they're doing it. But you can work out who's got the better advantage of getting in here and who's getting in there. And I think, you know, if Nigel and Reform don't win an overall majority and there needs to be a coalition, then, of course, I think what Kemi said, I know she sort of disputes some of the tone of the conversation that she had with Tim Shipman the other day at The Spectator, but broadly, I think she's right. This country does not want another left-wing government. And so whether you've left the Conservatives to join Reform, whether you are someone that's voted Labour that are joining Reform or fancy Reform and you can't stand the Conservatives, you've got to then look at the principles of what they're offering. And I think it would be, you know, foolish if the right-wing parties, centre-right parties, couldn't come together after election, because there is more in common there than what we'd get if we had anyone from the left.
Charlie, what a fantastic and absorbing assessment. Look forward to having you back in the studio, hosting as well as a top contributor as well. Talk star, broadcaster and former special advisor Charlie Rowley. Here are the Makerfield candidates. Jake Austin, Liberal Democrats, Count Binface Party, Andy Burnham, Labour, Dan Clark, Libertarian, John Dyer, Independent, Ed Gemmell, Climate. Paul Gould, Independent. Alan Loudhope, Official Monster Raving Loony Party. Robert Kenyon, Reform UK. Robert Pownell, Protect the Wild. Rebecca Shepherd, Restore Britain. Sarah Wakefield, Greens. Peter Ward, Rejoin EU. Michael Winstanley, the Conservative Party. Should there be a coalition of the right? Should Kemi, Rupert and Nigel hammer out a deal to save Britain? Your call's next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast. Should there be a coalition of the right? Nigel is in Old Reekie, the capital of Scotland, Edinburgh. Hello, Nigel.
Good morning, Mark.
I've got to congratulate Scotland on a 1-0 victory at the World Cup, beating Haiti. This is great news. The Tartan Army marches on.
It does indeed. It certainly does. Well done.
Very happy about that result. Now, Nigel, what do you think about this? A deal on the right, would that be the answer for Britain?
Not at the moment, no. And I listened to your last caller, which to me sounded very much like a reform plant. According to him, 1,000 racists turned up in Makerfield yesterday to support Rupert Lowe and Restore Britain and Rebecca Shepherd. We're not racist. We don't even begin to be racist. And I think that word now needs to have a proper definition and not be used as an insult. They've actually ruined the whole purpose of the word anyway.
Well, it's what the left do, isn't it?
Quite such a tirade as that, and that is completely unacceptable.
Nigel, why do Restore have this support? What has Rupert got that Nigel Farage hasn't?
Honesty. And it's as simple as that. If Nigel Farage didn't want Rupert Lowe in the party because he didn't like what he was saying about immigration, why didn't he call him in and say, Rupert, I'm sorry, we disagree. Would you please leave the party? He admitted live on television 2 or 3 months ago that he used lawfare to get rid of Rupert. And frankly, that is completely unacceptable. I no longer trust Nigel. I was 100% behind Nigel. I was a Reform member. I emailed him dozens of times when he said he wasn't going to stand in the last election, begging him to do so, the general election. But he has completely and utterly let us down. And there's no way back from that. The behaviour of Reform has been unacceptable, but more importantly, untrustworthy. I also emailed Nigel when it blew up with Rupert Lowe, and I emailed everyone I could think of, and I said, get this out in the open, got a barrister to look into this, get the barrister to question everyone, yourself, Zia Youssef, Rupert Lowe, Lee Anderson, everyone involved, do it live on YouTube, have it out there in the open so all of us members and supporters can see who is right and who is wrong. Well, they didn't do that. Had they done that, Reform may very well still have been in existence as a force that it was before they ejected Rupert Lowe.
Well,
no, Rupert Lowe isn't going to go back and join with somebody who literally used lawfare against him, and I certainly don't blame him to do so. But coming back to the point of the coalition, first of all, we've got to see what Makerfield happens in there. Everyone is quoting, they've only got 3%, one angry man with a social media account. Well, there were 1,000 angry people, therefore, in Makerfield yesterday, including one lady I heard on a podcast earlier who travelled down from Glasgow. She looks similar age to me, in her 60s, 70s maybe, And she says she's there to support Restore because she can no longer go to her local park. She can no longer use her bus service. She feels totally unsafe on her bus service. It's full of children from different backgrounds speaking foreign languages who don't know how to behave. And she says she feels trapped in her own home or thereabouts. Now, that's how we all feel. What Restore has done, it's motivated the people who haven't voted for years. My own Twitter feed, X feed, has gone from about 300 people following me before Rupert launched the party to 2,300 now.
Wow.
And they are all people saying, I've never voted before, I'm in my 50s, I've never thought it was worth voting, I've never trusted a politician before, I've joined the party, it's the best £20 I've ever spent, and so on and so on. Rupert has connected with the people who think politicians are in it for themselves. And politicians for decades have proven that they're in it for themselves. And he is the first man that we have seen who can be trusted. Farage said he was going to do a rape-going inquiry. He then backed off. Rupert has done one. He's about to be released very shortly. And what we know so far from it is appalling. We know that there are girls who've been trafficked from this country to other countries who wouldn't even have begun to believe. 15 years ago, probably, or thereabouts, my wife and I were at a meeting in Swindon. And she waited in the car while I went to do the meeting. We were parked on a street somewhere behind the station. And when I got back, he said, there's a house up there, and I keep seeing foreign men walking into that house, one after another, with young girls between them. Two men
Horrendous.
and a young girl between them. She said, I don't know what's going on. I assume it must be drugs or something. And we discussed it for a while and thought nothing more about it. Well, now it's obvious what was going on. This has been going on for decades. And the one person who has really got their teeth into it and got behind it is Rupert Lowe. We've seen what he's done.
Yeah.
He's the most active MP in Westminster. He's the best MP in Westminster. And personally, I think there's going to be a major shock in Makerfield on Friday morning. Reform cannot win it because of what they have done. Restore actually could win it. If the 47.5% of people in Makerfield who didn't vote in the last general election, if even half of them come out and support Rupert Lowe on Thursday, Restore will be the MP or have the MP for Makerfield.
Wow. Nigel, I wish we had longer. I've got so many calls to pack in there, but would you promise to call me again soon? Because I want to hear your thoughts. And for Nigel, Restore is not a racist outfit. It's not far right. What it is true, authentic, honest and sincere. That is his feeling. What do you think? Charlie's in Derbyshire. Hello, Charlie.
Morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm very well. Charlie, let me just bring some breaking news before I get to you. Lovely to have you on the show. Breaking news, British armed forces have intercepted a suspected Russian shadow fleet oil tanker in the English Channel. You heard me right. In a 6-hour operation in the early hours of this morning, Royal Marine Commandos and the National Crime Agency officers boarded the vessel named the Smirtos, with support from the RAF. The MOD says the tanker is now being held and monitored off the south coast of England. Prime Minister Keir Starmer praised the operation, saying it delivers yet another blow to Russia and those fueling the war in Ukraine. If you're just joining, we've got the breaking news. British Armed Forces have intercepted a suspected Russian shadow fleet oil tanker in the English Channel. Great to see the authorities act so quickly. Now stop the boats. Charlie.
Yeah, three things really, quick ones. The a coalition between the right, I don't think is a work. There's three big egos that they've got different policies, so it's I couldn't see that working. And regards the immigrants, I mean, you know, 100.
Oh, we've lost the line to Charlie. What a shame. But Charlie there thinks that some kind of coalition of the right is not going to happen. What about this voice note, if we can, David, from Jennifer? Take a listen.
Morning, Mark. Just listening to your chat on Unite the Right, and I heard Ben Habib yesterday. And I absolutely agree with Ben. If the right don't unite, and I believe behind reform, then it's going to be devastation at the next general election. And I've just got a question, really. As much as Farage and Lowe will not talk and may not see eye to eye and unite, do you think Ben Habib might act as a little bit of a referee,
Right.
an adjudicator between them to let them battle their argument out and finally come together and come up with a plan that absolutely does put the country first, not their egos, not the parties, but absolutely put the country first and get the right to win the next general election?
What a brilliant voice note. More of those to come. Should there be a coalition of the right? Should Kemi, Rupert and Nigel hammer out a deal to save Britain? Coming up next, this is absolutely fascinating. Switzerland today are going to vote on a plan to cap their population at 10 million people. They've got about 9.1 million at the moment. If it gets to 9.5 million, if this vote happens, if it's a yes, at that point, they stop taking migrants. So population cap is coming to Switzerland potentially. They're voting on that today. Should we do the same? I'll get reaction from a top Swiss political voice next.
We've got some breaking news that has just come in. talkSPORT have announced a brand new partnership and a developing story. We hear they've created So Good Lager right in time for football's big summer. Just in, we're hearing that So Good Lager will be pouring pints across all O'Neill's pubs and some of the best sports pubs across the UK. With the big kickoff just around the corner, you can find out where to get your hands on a fresh pint of So Good Lager at talksport.com/lager.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast. It is 7:50 and the people of Switzerland are today going to vote on a plan to cap the population at 10 million people. Let's get reaction from Switzerland and Roger Köppel, who's the editor and publisher of Switzerland's oldest weekly newspaper, Die Weltwoche. Roger, welcome to Talk Breakfast.
Thanks for having me. Great.
So the vote is happening today. Why does it enjoy growing support? What's behind this idea, Roger?
Well, the thing is that Switzerland had a huge immigration the last 26 years that was like a bit under the radar since the introduction of the free circulation of people with the European Union. You have to imagine our population growth was 1.9 million people since 2000, which is 16 times more than that of Germany's. We have now a foreigner ratio in Switzerland of about 27%, but we have also naturalized you could say, probably 1 million or so of foreigners. So we have total change, you could say, of circumstances. And we see now the effects, the negative effects. We see it on the labor market. We see it on our streets. It's all cramped. The traffic is near a heart attack. You have rising rents in cities. You have growing criminality in cities. You have a lot of problems. You have also a migration into the welfare state. So these problems are so visible that many people think it's enough is enough. Too many people are coming, and too many of the wrong people are coming.
So it's affecting the economy, infrastructure, and it's affecting society.
Absolutely.
And what sorts of people will vote yes today? Is it going to be people in the countryside? Is it going to be the German speakers? Who are the constituency in Switzerland that will support this measure, Roger?
Well, frankly speaking, I haven't met one single Swiss yet who is not voting yes.
Wow.
But probably I know the wrong kind of people. No, it seems to me that the surprising thing actually is that even in those, you could say, circles that normally would refrain from that. They would say, "Oh no, this is, I'm open to the world. I don't want to have anything to do with these migrant haters, these populists, whatever you call them." You see, there is a growing concern, even in those quarters of society which are not supposed to be in favor. However, our government has really fought this initiative, and all the economic organizations, the churches, the intellectuals, the newspapers, the legions of the elites, you could say, have fought against it. So I expect a no against this initiative, but I expect a relatively high percentage of people who will say yes to the initiative. However, in my view, it is overdue to do something. You cannot just, this is like limitless. It is out of control, and it shouldn't happen.
Tell me, Roger, about concerns around the link between higher immigration and more crime, because we think of Switzerland as a very ordered and safe society. Has that changed?
Yes, of course. I mean, I would say, relatively speaking, Switzerland is still a secure country, but compared to what it was like 30 or 40 years ago, things have changed dramatically. Of course, when you compare it to France, to Germany, to other countries, it's still better, but that's basically, there cannot be the comparison, because the situation there is quite catastrophic. So here we see the combination of two problems. On the one hand, we have the spiraling migration from the limitless immigration from the EU, which of course is proportionally not criminality. I mean, there are some of them, and then some of the criminals from the EU we cannot bring back due to international law. But there is also the asylum situation. And there is a connection to Europe, because since we have no borders, there is no control, no real control at the borders. So we are also participating in this orchestrated asylum mess we have in Europe. And so we were watching, I was very much in favor of the Brexit, and I was watching how Great Britain is coping. So there is still some control there, but the asylum situation is huge. We have 40,000 applications every year, which is like proportionate to Germany, for example. If they would have 400,000,
it's a huge number.
We have had, you have to see, we have had 650,000 asylum requests since 25 years. Only 17% of those have been true. I mean, you could say asylum seekers. The rest is economic migration.
For sure.
But these people have not brought they're here without a proper certification. They're supposed they should leave the country, but they say, well, we cannot bring them back because the situation in their country is too tough, so they're here. So from this 650,000, 17% are real asylum seekers, and from the rest, you could say 60% are still in Switzerland. So this is a huge problem, and the criminality is disproportionately in this segment of people.
This is what we see in the UK as well, is that people from overseas are disproportionately overrepresented when it comes to being recipients of welfare and subsidised housing, worklessness and crime. I'm afraid the facts don't care about your feelings, do they, Roger? And I really admire Switzerland. It's an incredible country with a rich history. It's a remarkable nation, but its legacy is under threat, isn't it? And it's not going to be a rich country, a successful or safe country indefinitely if things don't change.
Absolutely. And this, of course, is the perception of those people who have launched this initiative, which is the Swiss People's Party. You have to see that in 2014, we already had a popular vote, which was the so-called Masseneinwanderungsinitiative. It was the initiative against mass immigration. So, to the great surprise of everybody, the people and the cantons, our districts, said yes. And I was in politics at the time. I was in that party which launched the initiative. And I was there when the parliament had the duty to implement a law on this cute constitutional article to limit migration. I can tell you, Mark, I saw the sabotage of this with my own eyes.
So bad.
That the politicians didn't implement. And I hear their voices. They said in 2016, no, we find other means because it would piss off the European Union if you would introduce this. No, we have to take into account that, but we find other measures. It was the opposite. The problem is huge. One positive thing I have to mention here, and this is the greatest thing about Switzerland, it's still a direct democracy. So we don't have this kind of elite rule, this kind of spaceship rule out of the center. It's really, at the end of the day, the people can decide. But if you have an immigration like that, of course, the people changes quickly, the people who vote. And some of them, they adapt to the traditional Swiss way, but others, they import their own values. So this is also from a philosophical or from a real democratic point of view. It's very important how you handle your immigration.
Most definitely, Roger. And Switzerland has a horrible deal with the EU because you're not in the EU, but you have single market membership, which means free movement, which is a disaster for national security and the economy. And just briefly, Roger, only a few seconds, this is not about racism. It's not about skin colour, is it?
It's a very important thing that you're saying here. It's not an initiative against migration. That's fake news, which has been said. It's just, it would force the government to take measures to bring immigration down, only in case when the population is over 10 million, but they can act before. It's an initiative against uncontrolled mass migration of too much people and too much of the wrong people.
Roger, a privilege to have you on the show. Thank you for such a considered and interesting conversation. The vote happens today. We'll bring you more on that when we get it. Roger Köppel is the publisher of Die Weltwoche, which is the oldest weekly newspaper in Switzerland. More to come. This is Talk Breakfast.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Three minutes past 8, top of the morning. Happy Sunday, one and all. Mark Dolan, Talk Breakfast. Breaking this morning, it's war as the Defence Secretary detonates the Prime Minister's hopes of staying. The Burn, Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham poised to chuck Keir Starmer out of number 10 in days if he wins the Makerfield by-election. But is Burnham really the answer for Britain? Meanwhile, Nigel Farage has revealed he will evict foreign nationals from social housing. And as a new Defence Secretary is appointed, can Labour be trusted with Britain's national security? How are we going to survive 3 more years of this? And yesterday on Talk Breakfast, we broke the news. Ben Habib joined us on the programme, and he said, of course, he's a prominent figure on the political right in this country, that Rupert, Kemi and Nigel should hammer out a deal to save Britain. But what do you think? Should there be a coalition of the right in this country? 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Leave us a voice note. You can hear us on the radio, DAB+ in app and online. You can also watch the show. Head to YouTube, search Talk. And up we pop, and you'll see my rather controversial shirt. It's made quite a lot of people angry. Small minority happy. As Terry Wogan once said, not everyone's going to like you, and that's okay. Well, I love your calls and I want your opinions. We're going to put them on the radio and on the telly. Should there be a coalition of the right? Should Nigel, Rupert and Kemi, over a couple of drinks, hammer out a deal to save this country? Because, by God, it needs saving. And we'll kick off, if we can, David, with a voice note on that very subject. Here is Boz.
Morning, Mark, and for your fellow workers, travelling Boz here. Yes, I think the right have got to bury the hatchet with each other once and for all, because by the looks of it, old Burnham's going to win and then start galloping down towards number 10. And the thought of him being there for the next couple of years before the election, and with the policies they've got, it'll swing even more left. And I think the right have to pull themselves together and say, listen, for the sake of the country, we need to put our heads together and sort this out. Because as your guest said, if that lot in 3 years' time, can you imagine it? Burnham, Polanski, and that travelling clown head of the Liberal Party. Wow. No, must be stopped. Stopped in its tracks. Have a good show.
Thank you, Boz. Let's get reaction from the political strategist and broadcaster, Peter Barnes. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm very well indeed. I know you have your scepticism about the reform project, but surely a Nigel Farage-led government, perhaps with the support of Reform and the Tories, would be far better than another 5 years of Labour.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. But realistically, you need to stop talking about a coalition of the right. It's never going to happen. Move on, get over it, run better campaigns and beat each other. I don't understand why everyone keeps fussing over this. It's not going to happen.
Because it's the same voter pool.
Exactly.
And what's smart about Labour is that they are a coalition of the left, which is what the Tories used to be, and that's the problem.
100%, because realistically, Reform lost this by-election in Gorton and Denton, because they should have then turned their focus onto Andy Burnham and not stopped talking about, or kind of show that he was a bad mayor from that point on. Andy Burnham is a very popular politician. He has a positive poll rating, even in Greater Manchester, but nationally known as well. So that means that you've not only got an uphill battle to kind of beat him in terms of being a Labour Party person, but he's got his own branding. He's not the Labour Party. One thing that they did massively wrong in this campaign, both Restore and Reform, is they'd elevated him to a job he doesn't have. Why give the voter the option of getting rid of a very unpopular Prime Minister with a popular guy who they like? That was the stupidest thing you could have done.
Who's better at politics and a better communicator.
Also, when you actually look at the kind of local on-the-ground campaign, the leaflets, Reform obsess over everybody else. Labour don't even talk about opposition in their leaflets. It's local, 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 local. This problem they have is you've got to attack everybody. You just ignore them. You say, that's great, you're in the race. We've got our thing to run. You've got your thing to run. Good luck. End of conversation. By saying this, people like Restore and Rupert Lowe aren't a problem or they're not an issue, they're just online, you just fuelled their own rise. You gave them the oxygen they needed by denying their own existence, when everybody can see they exist. Also, you look very fragile and irritated by them, therefore everybody's going to pay even more attention to it. The problem is, realistically, for Reform, is that they spend more time fighting their own side than trying to win the by-election.
Or fending off attacks from their own side might be a defence to be made.
You can, yeah.
Because it is Rupert Lowe that's parked his tanks on Nigel's lawn.
Yes. Park your tanks on his. He's not perfect. It's not a perfect campaign.
Is that what Nigel is doing with this new announcement? I will evict foreign nationals from social housing. Is that the sort of red meat that is being provoked by the threat of Lowe?
That's the key word. Provoked by him. So that should have been announced before the by-election. This policy is great, good idea. However, it's now a reactionary policy against Restore Britain. That's how it could be framed, by Restore.
Isn't that how politics works?
It is, but you've got to do it first. You've got to lead.
Otherwise, people think you don't believe in these policies.
Yes, and
because
also,
why didn't you do that in the first place?
Yeah.
Why have you been strong-armed into it?
Yeah, that. Because Nigel's biggest problem, according to Restore, is he's not right-wing enough. He's not committed to the issue. This looks like Rupert Lowe has forced Nigel to the right. That is how it can be spun. Even if it's true or not, that's how they'll spin it. We keep forcing Nigel to the right because he's moving to the left. That kills them because it makes it look like Reform UK are all over the place. Restore have single focus. They all coded together, message discipline to a degree. That's the point. And I think this is the bit that so many people in Reform haven't quite understood. It is credibility. Credibility comes through message discipline, party unity, and a focus on the actual issues of the local people. Robert Kenyon, yes, he's a decent candidate. However, you miss the point of a local candidate. Just because you're from an area, it's not a qualification. It's an instrument. So what you do is you take the national issue and you make it hyper-local. So Nigel should have gone, this is really bad about immigration. Robert Kenyon, 20 minutes later, all over social media, oh yeah, what Nigel's just said there affects you in your local constituency by these reasons. You take national and you use the instrument to make it local. That is how you do it. Just because he's from an area, it doesn't mean anything. There's lots of people from lots of areas. So therefore, it's about how you channel it. And that connection wasn't made.
Because your messaging needs to have cut through at a local level, because clues in the name, it's a by-election in an area. It's not a general election. Before I get to John and Crew, very briefly, if you can, I wonder whether we're going to overinterpret what happens on Thursday, because at a general election, the public aren't stupid. And I suspect that the smaller operation, the smaller outfit of Restore will likely fall away at a general election, with voters on the right thinking, well, Nigel is more likely to be Prime Minister than Rupert, so I'll give my vote to Reform.
That would make sense if you didn't run this like it was a general election campaign, by talking about Downing Street, by talking about Number 10, by making Andy Burnham the Prime Minister. You put this in the voter mind about being a general election. So therefore, just by this polling alone, Restore won't fall away. They still have the problem of Restore. If anything, it's cemented them further. Well, how you deal with Restore is you outflank them on things like the economy, education, healthcare. You branch out from immigration. You make them look like the small little party that's just obsessed with immigration. You need to show that you're a serious political force, and that comes with focusing on more than anger, rage, and more importantly, you've got to have reach. I mean, everybody in their minds thinks Nigel Farage wants to privatise the NHS. That has to change. And that only changes when you start talking about the issue. And that happens when you have some policies that you can sell to people. They need spokespeople. They need actual kind of institutional grit, and they haven't got it. This is why this has been such a terrible campaign, because Nigel, who hid away for 50 days because of this expenses thing, wasn't even there for the announcement of Robert Kenyon. You know, that's a bit of a problem. You needed everybody else there, everybody present, and also focused on media calendar and discipline so that, you know, Nigel can make a speech. Next day, Richard Tice makes the same speech. You just reinforce. The voter then has word association. So Andy Burnham, neglect. That is what you needed. You've now got Andy Burnham, Prime Minister. That's what Reform have done. And it's not great for them.
I take what you're saying about the repeating of messaging, and you've got great insight into how to run a successful campaign, because I was in the United States during Barack Obama's second run at the White House for his second term in the campaign, and I was there for a couple of weeks, and he made the same speech every day for about 6 months.
My dad's a toolmaker.
Bingo.
Son of a toolmaker. Take back control. Take back control. Take back control. It is literal word association. You just do it. You sound stupid, and you will.
Labour isn't working.
Change. Nobody bothers to ask what the change is if you just keep saying change. And that's how you do it. That's literally how you do it. Reform they haven't got the word association game yet.
We have some breaking news. British armed forces have intercepted a suspected Russian shadow fleet oil tanker in the English Channel. You heard me right. Fantastic that the forces have managed to identify this, and they've now got hold of this vessel. But a Russian shadow fleet oil tanker, it's a huge story. It's a great example of how the can snap into action in the Channel. So next time, stop the boats. John is in Crewe. Good morning, John. You are live with political strategist Peter Barnes. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you, and a pleasure to speak to you.
You too, John, thank you.
This by-election is vital. The possible outcomes, but what nobody considers is if Reform were to win overall, it would completely finish off the other two parties. On the other hand, if it turns out as we expect, it will then mean that we will definitely we'll have a general election very quickly. And that is because Labour will have proved that they have a good case and a chance of winning, and they will want to go quickly before they're exposed under Burnham, and at a time when the right wing are split. That will be the right time for them.
And John, give me that timeline. Do you think if Burnham wins Makerfield, do you think he goes to the country this side of Christmas or next year?
I don't know, but it won't be long. You weigh up the thinking behind Labour. He has got a team. It's like a football manager taking over a team with most of the players on crutches. He can't do anything. And that's the point. If he takes over,
and there's no football,
he'll be exposed very quickly. But what I feel most annoyed about, I've got steam coming out of my ears about this unpatriotic person in the Rupert Lowe. If he had any thought for the country, he's every right to stand, but he is basically handing everything over the best possible opportunity to get rid of this communist government that's ruining the country. And Nigel Farage proved that he had the country. The main reason he stood down with Boris Johnson was not for himself, it was for the good of the country to get out of Brexit. And we don't have that. And in my own opinion, and I lived through the war, so I'm not young. In my lifetime, we've had two outstanding politicians. One of them is Lee Kuan Yew, who turned Singapore into an amazing place.
Yeah.
The other one is Nigel Farage. He is exceptional. He's been right on everything. We don't need politicians who learn by the mistakes. Nigel Farage has been right on all big issues, whether it's been immigration, HS2,
net zero,
everything. And it's the best opportunity to save this country. In fact, it's the only opportunity.
What a powerful call. John, my goodness, will you please call me again soon, because you spoke in a very articulate way and you're very, very clear that the country's only hope is Nigel Farage. Peter, lots to deal with there. First of all, what do you think about John's suggestion that if Burnham gets into number 10, an election is coming sooner rather than later?
For me, the timeline is Makerfield, leadership election, Greater Manchester Mayor, because you need to replace him, because that will then have their people in place before a general election. So then, you know, you've got the operation, you've got the ground game that they need to kind of replace, make sure that all that is set. Because the Red Wall, where Manchester is obviously going to be a big territory fight between Reform and Labour. So they need the institutions sorted, they need their people in place, they need to make sure that they also win it with a convincing margin to put down any kind of rise of Reform on a local level. Because don't forget, if Andy wins, he's the Prime Minister, he's the returning hero. He's like, look, I beat Reform in this territory, I took on a seat that was trending towards Reform at the local elections, I can do this. That narrative is very powerful. You know, then that means Labour will win that area. That then gives them an extra boost. So I think a general election may be just before Christmas or just after. But depending on when they can actually get it all together.
I've long thought that a snap election will happen.
Yeah, because if Burnham wins, he's the conquering hero that I can beat Reform
And
UK.
he has momentum, and we don't know too much about him, and he can blame Starmer for everything. The issue you've got is if he stays in post at number 10 for 2.5 years, well, it's going to be a horrible time, isn't it? Because the economy's in the toilet.
He's no longer the outsider. He's then part of the Labour kind of problem. At the moment, he's not connected to it. People haven't connected Andy Burnham to the Labour Party mess. He's the person that's going to replace it. He's the person that's going to clean it up or, you know, change things. Whether you agree with the narrative or not, that's what they'll spin. So therefore, he's not been tarred with any of the catastrophe. So that's the thing. The longer he stays in number 10 without a general election, he'll then be tarred with the same brush. But for me, they need the Greater Manchester win to put down a rise of Reform, because I think Reform, technically at the moment, could win the Greater Manchester Mayor. That would be huge if they did.
Plus, no one wants to run Britain for the next 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Because have you seen the gilt yields, the cost of government borrowing? Have you seen what's going to happen to inflation? Have you seen unemployment?
Yes.
So the metrics are disastrous. 1 in 6 members of the Sunday Times Rich List of last year have left the country. 16,000 millionaires. The tax take is going to drop. So we are in economic quicksand. You don't want to be Prime Minister for the next 2 years, in my opinion. What you can do is call a snap election and then get 5 years.
Yeah, or snap election, you lose, somebody else has to deal with that then. May say they inherit all of this mess. They're unlikely to turn it around as quickly as is necessary, because again, if the court, they're still not got the institutional level, they've not got the candidates, they've not got the mechanisms, all this kind of stuff. A snap election would actually be terrible for Reform UK at the moment if Andy Burnham becomes the Prime Minister.
The Makerfield candidates: Jake Austin, Liberal Democrats, Count Bin Face Party, Andy Burnham, Labour, Dan Clark, Libertarian, John Dyer, Independent, Ed Gemmell, Climate, Paul Gould, Independent, Alan Loud, Hope, Monster Raving Looney Party, Robert Kenyon, Reform UK, Robert Pownall, Protect the Wild, Rebecca Shepherd, Restore Britain, Sarah Wakefield, Green Party, Peter Ward, Rejoin EU, Michael Winstanley, the Conservative Party. Should there be a coalition of the right in this country? Should Nigel, Kemi and Rupert hammer out a deal? Your calls next, 8:21. This is Talk Breakfast.
crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in Crisis. Subscribe to The Royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast. Mark Dolan with you until 10 a.m. Dolan's Dispatch on the way at 9 a.m. Live in the studio, the fearless Peter Barnes, political strategist. And Peter, what about that breaking news? British armed forces have intercepted a suspected Russian shadow fleet oil tanker in the English Channel. A reminder, if we needed it, that the defence of this realm is of critical importance, arguably our #1 priority as a country.
Oh, yes, it is the only priority. It is #1. It is without a doubt the most important thing you ever do because, you know, if you don't have a country, everything else is irrelevant. So the idea that we could even have any funding gap in defence at any point, no matter who is in power, is laughable, it's dangerous, and if you're not up to that job, out the door you go. I mean, it doesn't matter where you're getting the money from. Get the money, fill the gap, do what they want. When people like the Chief Secretary are out and say this is the most dangerous time we've ever been in, when people say we're making it less safe, pay attention. These aren't party political people. These are people that's literal job is to keep us safe, and they don't come forward and they don't scare people. They literally make a point. That is why we have to pay attention. That's why everything that's going on with this defence funding, we have to pay attention to. And every political party should be coming to the table with a fully funded defence plan. Every single one. The Tories are not really anywhere on this. Reform aren't anywhere on this. Restore don't even talk about it. You know, the Greens, laughable. Ed Davies probably doing Takeshi's Castle, so he's out of the situation. But this is my point, is that if you want to be credible on this issue, it is fully funded, it is costed, it is literally, everything's sewn up nice, tight, done. You want a nice, shiny face, somebody from ex-forces to be your spokesperson, and they just talk about it endlessly. And that's how you do it. This is the point. The way Russia's doing it is what we call grey zone warfare. So you test and you test and you test. So basically, they have no intention of trying to kind of invade or anything like that. What they want to do is deplete our resources. So we have to send a ship out. We have to send the planes out. And then they time the reaction speed. Are we getting faster? Are we getting slower? We're getting slower. That means we're becoming more vulnerable. That also means that our allies know we're more vulnerable. So therefore, NATO has to reshift resources. Shifting resources means less for Ukraine. Therefore, Russia get the advantage. It is literally, you just have to follow the gap. Follow the pattern, and you know they've been doing it for ages. The cyber attacks are the same thing. You know, you test the infrastructure. Our infrastructure is non-existent. I mean, our National Health Service shuts down every year because people get a cold. That is part of national defence because we have a National Health Service. This is the only thing we've got in terms of if there ever is some kind of chemical attack or whatever, they take that out. were done for. This is why it is all so important. I go back to the Heathrow fire incident where it was one terminal that, one generator that went down. It took out Heathrow.
Yeah.
Heathrow is a huge player in international security. It's not just where you go on holiday. It is a transport hub. It's a military transfer site. It's laughable that, that happened and everybody in the world went, what are you doing, Britain? And we didn't do anything about it.
Most definitely. And the political model of Russia is now war, and it will be for the foreseeable future. We could be at war with Russia by 2030. We have to take this seriously. The problem we have, Peter, is that the progressive left, who dominate our public institutions, notwithstanding whoever is in power, have a blind spot regarding defence.
Yeah.
Or is it worse than blind spot? Is it some twisted ideology that's against defending the country?
I think there is certainly an element of that. I go back to Jeremy Corbyn, who didn't want to have an armed force, and Keir Starmer was very right on board with supporting him to be Prime Minister.
He would not answer the question, would you press the nuclear button if we were invaded?
That was the single greatest moment of Theresa May. Do you know, there was a Lib Dem MP, this was when it was the vote to redo Trident. Literally, they tried to hand her and say, you're going to kill millions of people, do this, do that. Theresa May stood up and she said, I'll press the button. She sat right back down. The single greatest moment of that woman's entire political career, because she showed defiance, she showed leadership, and that is what you need. It is not a kind of, well, this could happen. It is literally, I will press the button. A deterrent is only a deterrent if you're willing to use it. And unfortunately, there's too many people in the British establishment that are terrified of saying that out loud, because they don't want to be the one that wants nuclear war. Nobody wants it. The mad theory kind of works. So the moment you go, well, that gives an opening to people who, aren't that scared of using it.
No one wants to break their legs skiing, but everybody gets travel insurance.
Yes.
So this is the perilous state that we are now in as the country. At the heart of this, it strikes me at the heart of all of our problems is the economy.
Oh, yeah.
Because without the economy, you cannot defend the realm.
You can't do anything. You want to stop the small boats, you need money. You want to change the defence, you need money. We don't have a growing economy. January, zero growth. Zero growth. That's an embarrassment. It's also a national security risk.
And we're paying the price for a pretend war that was waged for 3 years, from 2020 to 2023, which was COVID.
Yeah.
And we treated that like a war, except that this is the real war.
Oh, yeah. The war spirit narrative is fine, but you don't tell people not to go to a hospital if there's something wrong with you, because that's why you've got the wait lists. That's why everything is always kind of so far behind. Also, doctors, you're not allowed to strike anymore. I'm sorry, that goes. If you're a National Health Service, you can't have striking doctors.
Do you want to stick around, Peter?
Sure.
Because for 10 minutes, if you don't mind, we know you've got a packed schedule, but I'd love you to join Freddie Gray, who is the deputy and US editor of The Spectator, because we've got this growing geopolitical story. We've got Donald Trump turning 80 and a possible peace deal in the offing with Iran. We'll bring full reaction to that next. This is Talk Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast. It's lovely to have your company. The time is exactly 31 minutes past 8. And this weekend, Donald Trump turns 80. Has he been a good president? Let's get the views of Freddie Gray, deputy and US editor of The Spectator. Good morning, Freddie.
Good morning, Mark. Lovely to be with you.
Will Donald Trump be in a celebratory mood this weekend as he turns 80?
I think he will be. I think he's very much looking forward, by all accounts, to the UFC mixed martial arts cage fight that's going to take place on the White House lawn. He's had a difficult few months. I think nobody, no fair-minded observer would deny that. He's been more irritable than usual in public recently. He's been quite fatigued. White House officials keep denying this, but he has appeared to doze off on quite a few occasions. And the point is, even for a man of Donald Trump's almost superhuman energy levels, being president and the style of president that Donald Trump wants to be, it's extremely difficult to do when you're in your 9th decade. Human beings do slow down, and he's not human, despite what people say. And I mean, Joe Biden, the comparison is made with Joe Biden. Joe Biden, of course, was in a worse physical and mental state than Donald Trump. But Trump is a bit fatigued. But I think he'll be in a good mood, and he'll be in a particularly good mood because of what you mentioned, which is this peace deal. It's not exactly a peace deal. It's a memorandum of understanding, but it's a very important first step, and it should mean a reopening of the Strait of Hormuz and some possible relief for the global economy.
Will history judge the war in Iran conducted by the United States and Israel to have been a good idea, Freddie?
Well, I think that I would say no, but I know quite a lot of people who think actually on the geostrategic level he has done what was necessary. He has taken out China's most important ally in the region, or at least crippled it in a big way. He's forced Iran to accept a nuclear deal that is far more limiting than the JCPOA, which is what Barack Obama forced Iran to sign. I would say, against all that he has imperiled his own political legacy at home. He has the midterms coming up in November. Inflation is now baked in. I think even if the war was to end completely tomorrow, the consequences of the strait being closed for so long are going to have bad effects on the American economy that are going to cause Donald Trump's party, the Republican Party, to lose the House and the Senate in the midterms, unless they can turn something spectacular around, which it doesn't look like they can. And therefore, Trump will have his last 2 years hampered as a president, unable to assert his executive authority in the way that he wants to. And I think it will be seen as his biggest mistake.
Well, that's very interesting. Freddie, with me in the studio is Peter Barnes, political strategist. Freddie's points are very interesting, aren't they, Peter? Yeah. There are many on the right who have parted company with Donald Trump over Iran. They backed the tariff trade war. America now trades on better terms with the world than it previously did. They're delighted at what's happened on the southern border, which has unilaterally been closed. We've had the executive orders bringing back common sense to the US public institutions, particularly the primacy of biological sex. Lots of wins. Iran, massive own goal.
Oh, without a doubt, that the own goal rather overshadows everything else that you could say that he's done very well. I completely agree with most of what Freddie said. My thing is why he's more is actually understanding why he's more irritable. And I actually think that is because everybody has worked against him, despite the fact we're all supposed to be allies. You know, he's had to deal with the fact that he couldn't use the Chagos Islands. He's had to deal with obstructionists and a NATO allies that have literally no armed forces, no industrial capacity. They've opposed him in every single way. The reason the Strait of Hormuz is such a focus is because European economies are so weak and reliant on one single stretch of the map to be able to actually operate and function. One thing I think in the long term, where Donald Trump will have done the right thing, is actually he's forced NATO and the West to, one, get its act together in the terms of defence. I mean, we're talking about defence funding now. We should have been doing that about 5-10 years ago, if not longer. But also, he's forced the NATO allies to understand that the world actually exists outside of them and that it is not a particularly nice place, and we have to have insurance policies. We have to have So if Iran does shut down the Strait of Hormuz, we don't shut down our entire economy. That the shock isn't as big. I completely agree. His next 2 years are probably going to be horrific for him. But I think in the long term, what he'll have done for the world will outweigh it. However, because he's Donald Trump, nobody will care.
Briefly, before I get back to Freddie, though, Peter, has Donald Trump given Iran the idea of weaponising the Strait of Hormuz, which was previously never on the table? And will that not be the legacy of this war?
To be honest, it's a bit of a
new thing now.
Yeah.
It's a brand new weapon that many would argue Donald has handed to the Iranians.
But it's new in terms of it actually being applied. However, it's not going to be the only instance of this. So if you look, why he wants to get hold of Greenland is that kind of Arctic corridor is now open. So that's why America wants to have a greater presence in that area, because shipping is starting to flow through it. So yes, it is now, that may be never done before. I think it was pretty obvious that was the one thing that the Iranians were probably going to do. But again, because European nations and allies are so kind of hell-bent on, not having its own energy policy, not having a defence and all this kind of thing, this is why Trump is kind of trying to fight a war with one hand tied behind his back.
Freddie, Donald Trump's not really a politician, is he? And I consider him to be a man of considerable courage. So if you look at this war in Iran, he hasn't taken the path of least resistance, which previous presidents have. In dealing with Iran in the past, it's been a talking shop. And Donald Trump puts his money where his mouth is, supports Israel, who face an existential threat from Iran, annoys his own base, because, of course, he was elected on the idea of no foreign wars. So Donald Trump has done this without skin in the game. In fact, it's hurting his political interests. One can therefore only assume he's done it because it's the right thing to do.
I think there's certainly an argument, and that's going to be the argument that Donald Trump and his cabinet are going to make over the coming weeks, which is that, everything was going great. The economy was about to gear up again for another massive boom. I was about to be the most successful man of all time. But heroically, I decided that I had to do something about Iran. I think they may get away with saying that. But I think the truth is more complicated than that. And the reality of it is less benevolent and benign.
And the truth is the war hasn't gone very well. That's the problem. Possibly a great policy, Freddie. Execution, not so much.
Well, exactly. And what is the actual nature of the deal? The Memorandum of Understanding now currently being negotiated by different Middle Eastern parties and Iranians and America. What is going to happen with the nuclear dust? Because that, of course, Trump has always said is his big sticking point. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. How is that going to work? How much money is going to be given to Iran to make sure that they don't keep threatening the strait? Because Middle Eastern partners say they will not accept a toll system where every ship has to pay Iran a toll to get through. But there is a lot of frozen assets of Iran. Are they going to be unfrozen? How are they going to be unfrozen? There'll be a grubbier side to this deal as it comes across, because America knows, and the rest of the world, apart from possibly Israel, accepts that this war has to stop. That strait has to open, or the whole economy, the whole global economy, is going to melt down.
Has Donald been naive?
I think perhaps...
Has he listened to the wrong people? Has he been let down by his team?
I think he was perhaps misled. Some people say he was misled by Israel, by Bibi Netanyahu, into thinking that this war would be a kind of cakewalk. I think, he said at the beginning, 4 weeks tops. It's 4 months it's been. So, yes, I think he underestimated the scale of the problem. He will, of course, put a positive spin on it, because he is almost a genius at making things seem positive when they aren't. But it's interesting also the sort of unreality of it all. I mean, last week, as this peace deal was making progress, Donald Trump was saying he was going to occupy Karg Island by force. He was saying he was going to obliterate Iran back to the Stone Age. And even yesterday, in announcing that the Memorandum of Understanding will be signed tomorrow on his birthday, he vaguely alluded to the fact that he may have to use a weapon that should only be used once, effectively saying, I could nuke Iran. So even while he's doing peace, he does this sort of theatrical posturing for very aggressive war. Does that make future US deterrence limited, because you've effectively been bluffing at the highest level for quite a long time now. I think it's a very, very risky game he's played. Has he just got away with it? Possibly, but I think probably not.
Well, that's very interesting, isn't it? Peter, what will the legacy of this war in Iran be?
It depends who you ask. I think Freddie's perfectly right. It depends what's actually in this memorandum of understanding. There is no mention realistically.
Which is, by the way, a plan about a plan.
It's a plan about a plan. It's like let's have a meeting about a meeting that we're going to have in about 6 months. But there's no nuclear kind of deal mentioned really within it. And Freddie's right that this was really Trump's sticking point. The big realistic legacy is actually about stopping China. So they have what they call the Davidson window, which is the idea that by the time that this within a certain time, that is when China will be able to just walk into Taiwan, and that will change pretty much everything because it's all to do with microchips and that kind of stuff. Trump has been able to kind of keep that window not just open, but to extend it a little bit further so that, we can actually make sure that China is stopped. Because if you think we've got a problem now, when you have trade routes that aren't reliable, that is when everybody panics. I do think, though, that Trump will be remembered. It'll be a controversial war, but again, I think the outcome of it, I think, will actually be quite positive for him, but it will be only positive on a very kind of narrow kind of understanding. In other words, if you actually look how the first couple of days of the Iran war actually went, it was a surgical strike like you've never seen. I mean, they were able to take out their entire satellite system. They've no navy. The air missile defense system was practically useless. That was a very, very targeted and a very deliberate show of force to show that, yes, we don't have to carpet bomb you. We can just take you out very surgically, and there's nothing you can do about it. I do think the finance part is absolutely vital that Freddie mentioned about the seized assets, because Iran has a massive economic problem, and I do think that is one of the reasons that he's not taken out the entire top brass of the Iranian regime, because we learned from Iraq, when you do that, that's when all the nutcases take over.
Freddie, let's have a look at Donald Trump's record so far, closing the southern border unilaterally. We can only dream of such political courage in this country in regard to what's happening in the Channel. So he closes the southern border, ends illegal immigration, pretty much hammers the final nail in the coffin for woke by ending DEI policies. Cheap energy, American jobs, American industry being supported by a variety of policies, improved trading relations with the world via the tariff war, and an Iran put back in their box. Is that enough for a great legacy?
It could be, and when you put it like that, it sounds like it, doesn't it? I mean, certainly on immigration, I think that is, as they approach the midterms, that's what Republicans are going to be emphasising, that we are the only party that has actually done, in the developed world, really, that has actually done something serious to address an immigration crisis. And they have succeeded. They have done it. There is, of course, a lot of arguing about deportations in America. There's a lot of arguing about ICE. The Trump administration took the rare step of backpedaling a bit after those killings in January, when 2 anti-immigration protesters were killed. They did, Kirsty Noem was eventually fired. She was Secretary of DHS. Tom Homan, who's the sort of border czar, was brought in, and he's seen as this big tough guy, but he's also an Obama-era official too. He's a kind of very sensible guy in many ways. So he was brought in to be a kind of calming, moderating force to make it not look like the Trump administration was deliberately going to war with people over immigration. And that's because they wanted to emphasize what they've done, which is seal the border for illegal immigration, which is a huge achievement and something that voters, as you suggest, Mark, have been crying out for. So that's a big win. Yeah. I think on the economy, it could have been a big win, but Iran has upset that.
Yeah.
And I think on other fronts, this massive breakneck speed achievements that you had in the first 100 days, they have slowed down as they've hit the sort of reality of politics.
Briefly, Freddie, what about that tariff trade war? We know that some of those tariffs are going to be reversed, aren't they? Will there be a positive legacy from that particular battle?
That's a very, very difficult question to answer, because nobody quite knows what the impact of the tariffs are. There's, some people are still arguing now that it's inflation causing, and it undoubtedly is in some ways, but that was exacerbated by Iran. We're still dealing with inflation from COVID, so that's hard to tell. I think protecting your economies, protecting your industrial base, that is increasingly accepted as a good thing to do. And I think the Trump administration has led the way in doing that. So, yes, I think mixed picture.
And Freddie, he turns 80 this weekend and probably nuked in the midterms. So he will be thwarted, really. The rest of his presidency, it's going to be a lot of noise and not too much action?
I think there will be. I think he will, in the long term, come to be seen as a truly historic figure, a kind of world-changing figure. He has changed the very nature of politics, for good and for bad. He has completely dismantled a political class, the Republican Party to start with, but effectively a political class in a way that America operated for decades. He has been the figure that has done more than anyone else, around which a massive change has happened. And he has been the news. You know, for a long time in America, there is the news, and then there is Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is the news. So it's just, you know, he is an enormously important person.
Freddie, I pay for my Spectator membership with pleasure. It's always an important and compelling read. Freddie Gray is the deputy and US editor of said magazine, which is available in hard copy and online as well. My thanks to the outstanding Peter Barnes. What a conversation we have had. To be continued. But next up, Trooping of the Colour. One particular runaway prince noticeable in his absence. That's next.
Is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This weekend saw the celebration of the King's official birthday, Trooping the Colour, a wonderful event. Someone noticeable in their absence, Prince Harry, who was likely watching this wonderful occasion on a flat-screen telly from his Montecito mansion. But what were his emotions, given the fact that he was noticeable in his absence? Who better to ask than the brilliant royal broadcaster Kinsey Schofield, host of Kinsey Schofield Unfiltered, who I understand joins us live from Windsor. Good morning, Kinsey.
I'm not going to lie to you, Mark. I did not notice Prince Harry not there at Trooping the Colour. It was so grand seeing the family, healthy, happy, Princess Catherine in that baby blue, looking just serene. I didn't miss Prince Harry, and I'll tell you, he wasn't watching Trooping the Colour on a flat screen TV. He was in Texas at a Knicks game, always having to distract from his family, the most inappropriate timing. He jumps on a plane without Meghan and goes to this big sporting event to try to distract from the life of service that his family is truly living on full display here in the UK.
Harry snubs King Charles. That is outrageous. You would think, wouldn't you, on this occasion, that he would stay home, watch the ceremony, maybe issue some kind of message congratulating his father on this special occasion. The idea that he publicly goes to a sports game is a wild insult and a wild snub to his own father.
It really is, and I had some unique access yesterday with the Grenadier Guards, and I was looking at just these walls and walls of medals and what they signified not only for the guards, but for the British royal family in general, and that history that they have with some of these armed forces. And I said to someone, I can't believe Prince Harry would give this up. I mean, this truly is the life of service he promised when he stepped back as a working member of the British royal family. And it's my understanding that this was his favorite aspect of his life. He talks about how Prince William and the King are basically in prison in these roles that they clearly, in my opinion, thrive in and enjoy. But the reality is that yesterday, Trooping the Color was one of Prince Harry's favorite royal moments. It was one of Prince Harry's favorite executions, and he missed it. I mean, I don't think we miss Harry, but I do think Harry misses this world.
And I'm shocked by the messaging, because what we've learned, haven't we, in recent years, Kinsey, is that the Sussexes don't do anything by accident. And by Harry effectively upstaging his father and going to a sports game in the middle of this venerated moment for the country is a slap in the face, it's an insult, and it's on purpose.
I completely agree with you.
I mean, Harry knows. Harry knows. It's Trooping the Colour. I'm going to be photographed at a Knicks game.
I'm going to be photographed at a Knicks game without my wife. I think one of the last times
Oh, they're never together. They can't stand each other.
I know. I think one of the last times we spoke together, we were talking about how often we're seeing Prince Harry without Meghan Markle these days.
Forget it.
But, I'm wondering if he's here, if this is him trying to justify that the place he found himself in Time's list of 100 most influential sports figures. And it's like, what? It's due to Invictus, but you know as well as I do that he didn't earn that spot there, and that this is all PR, trying to spin Invictus in a positive way with so much chaos surrounding the charity.
Most definitely. Well, yesterday was a very special occasion. Do you think that Harry was hurting this weekend? Because he can go to as many Knicks games as he likes, and he can eat as many hot dogs, and he can drink as much weak American beer as he likes. He knows that he's not there, and he should be.
I do think it was hard for him, and being there and seeing the crowds. I mean, the crowds were unreal. It was hard to get anywhere. I think I was stuck there for an hour trying to get away from Buckingham Palace after it all ended. When we were in front of the balcony, somebody started yelling, 3 cheers for King Charles, hip hip, and then everyone started yelling. They started singing happy birthday to King Charles while he was on the balcony. I've never seen a public so enthusiastic and so proud of their monarchy, so proud of their country. And I do think Prince Harry misses that. The United States is, you just did a panel on it, kind of chaotic right now. And the king continues to show his value, why the monarchy is such an important asset to the UK. And Prince Harry used to have a reason, to exist. Prince Harry used to have a reason to jump out of bed every day. And, hopping around from Super Bowls to Knicks games is not exactly what I would consider the life of service he once said he was going to pursue after he left this family.
Most definitely. Where's Meghan?
Well, I mean, that's the big question. I'm sure she's sitting around somewhere preparing us for another mildly boring Instagram carousel dump that she's now using to try to manipulate the way that we picture her. But I don't really think she's doing much either. No new TV shows, no new podcasts. Seems like they've taken a break from contributing anything of value.
It seems to be, and quite clearly at this wonderful occasion yesterday, Trooping the Colour, the royal family do not need the Sussexes. Like you said, you've got the Windsor All-Stars, the King and Queen, the Prince and Princess of Wales, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. The list goes on. Who the hell is Harry? Who cares?
No, I mean, I didn't think about him at all yesterday. I was just thinking, well, and I, really, Harry should be sitting back thinking, look what I'm excluding my children from, because Princess Catherine, I saw her get back into the carriage as they were going back to Buckingham Palace to get on the balcony. And I loved the way she sat in with the carriage and she asked the children if they had fun. They'd been watching above her. And Harry's children are missing out on such important, historic, amazing events. And Harry has to know that, and I saw her laughing in the carriage with Prince George and Prince Louis and Princess Charlotte. Harry has to know that he is robbing his children of incredible moments with his family.
Most definitely, they're going to be very bitter when they're older, aren't they? Because they've been turned into celebrities by their parents at the age of 5 and 7. And they'll have had no contact with their great-grandfathers, Thomas Markle Sr. and King Charles.
Or their cousins. I mean,
by the way, I should say grandfathers. Grandfathers, forgive me.
They're going to grow up and not have any relationship with their cousins, who are ridiculously normal and sweet and outgoing children so far.
And they should be playing hide and seek at Buckingham Palace.
They should be, and they should be in one of those carriages with their father.
Yeah.
But their mother and their father have made such poor decisions that I agree with you, they will be resentful of once they're adults.
Yeah, most definitely. What did you make of the King's body language yesterday? Does he seem happy?
He does seem happy, and I had mentioned I was with Matt Wilkinson from The Sun. We were watching the balcony together, and I said, have you noticed that King Charles and Prince William were laughing together, which I thought was really important. We watched some exchanges between them, and they were laughing together. So they seemed, I think the King was especially smitten when the crowd started singing for him and hip hip hooray for him. I think it was a great day. He really enjoyed himself, and I know that he loves this day.
What's your appraisal of that relationship between Charles and William post Harry? What's the mood music? Where are they at, those two men?
I reread Spare a while ago, and Harry talks about how shocked he is when Prince William and King Charles approach him at Windsor. And he is surprised and almost startled that there is a unity there, that they're kind of united against him as they approach him, and he can sense that. And, Harry's absence has made these two closer. Are they both strong-willed and independent and have their own ideas? I will never argue that. But I also think that the absence of Prince Harry has changed their dynamic, and they're much closer than they would have been if Harry were still in the fold.
And do you think now that William is being treated as king-elect?
I don't think so. I think that Prince William is in the same way that King Charles forged his own role as the Prince of Wales. I think Prince William is doing something very similar and just defining that Prince of Wales role. I think we're impressed with him, and that might be why we see some king reflections in his actions.
Well, listen, talking about the King, you are the queen of royal reporting. Kinsey, what a thrill to have you in the UK. You look fantastically well, and thank you for this wonderful coverage. I know you've been so busy the last 24 hours, and you've helped to celebrate this important occasion. It's not about Harry and Meghan. It's about the King and his official birthday. My thanks to Kinsey Schofield. Check out her brilliant Schofield Unfiltered show. More to come. Dolan's Dispatch next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Three minutes past 9, top of the morning. Happy Sunday, one and all. Mark Dolan, Talk Breakfast. Lovely to have your company. Breaking this morning, British Armed Forces have intercepted a suspected Russian shadow fleet oil tanker in the English Channel. The forces have swooped on this vessel and now have occupied it. So the authorities reacting very quickly in the Channel. Here's my message. Now stop the boats. And by the way, if the Russians deploying a shadow fleet oil tanker in the English Channel, if that's not a red flag, if that's not a clear message that we need to spend money protecting this country, investing in our military, then nothing is. Meanwhile, feel the burn. Greater Manchester and Mayor Andy Burnham is poised to unseat Keir Starmer if he wins the Makerfield by-election. But is Burnham the answer for Britain? We'll be asking one of my favourite political commentators, Annunziata Rees-Mogg, live on the show shortly. And Annunziata will be taking your calls. A simple question this morning. Should there be a coalition of the right in this country? Should Kemi, Rupert and Nigel do a deal to save Britain? 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Leave us a voice note. And as the saying goes, let's talk. Better straighten my tie because, yes, you can hear us on the radio, DAB+, in-app and online, but we are a television network now as well. And if you want to see the show and watch Dolan's Dispatch, head to YouTube, search Talk and up we pop. And we kick off, as always, at this time every Friday, Saturday and Sunday with Dolan's Dispatch. There's an old saying in life, be careful what you wish for. Now, on paper, it's fantastic news to see the government scaling back on the use of hotels to accommodate illegal immigrants. These venues are often an essential part of the community. Hotels are used for tourism, business meetings, and an afternoon treat for the family. We love, don't we, the local hotel. In most towns and cities, hotels are suffused with life memories. People have had their weddings there, christenings, funerals, leaving do's, and a hotel often serves as an excellent ornament in any town or city. It's unreal, therefore, to think that these venues, which the public have often saved up money in advance in order to stay at, should be handed over to people who have breached our national borders. So back in the day, you saved up to stay at the Royal Bath Hotel in Bournemouth, for example, and now such a venue is accommodating illegal immigrants. It's wild. It is unimaginable. And what about the Bell Hotel in Epping, which is now sadly not famous for its fluffy pillows and full English, or its well-appointed spa? It's famous and infamous as a focal point for public protests following the horrendous sexual assault of a local 14-year-old girl by an illegal immigrant who was staying there. Extraordinary, isn't it, that a place where you would previously take your granny on her 80th birthday as a special treat is now providing bed and board to a stranger from overseas whose background is unknown and who may well have discarded his phone and documents in the sea as he crossed the channel. So the migrant hotels are a national scandal and the demonstration of the failure of the state to do their job. But I'm afraid to say at 9:07 on a Sunday morning that the alternative to migrant hotels is arguably even worse. Homes of multiple occupancy. What this means is the parachuting in of illegal immigrants across the length and breadth of the land and into our communities. Welcome to Broken Britain, with illegal immigrants coming to a town near you, a neighbourhood or a street like yours. Now, at least with the migrant hotels, these men are largely all in one place, with some degree of security overseeing things. With homes of multiple occupancy, these people are dissipated across the land. Thousands of people distributed all over the country. And how might a young family feel as their children play in the garden or practice learning the bicycle at the front of the house when they are next door or down the road from a group of men in a hotel, I should say a house, 6, 8 or 10 people undocumented in a home of multiple occupancy? It doesn't fill your heart with joy, does it? What do these HMOs mean for social cohesion? Are you comfortable with the idea of little Johnny or little Jenny walking to school on their own? Do you want your teenage daughter walking back from a night out, knowing that there are nearby houses full of bored, young, undocumented men? Now, this is not to demonise illegal immigrants who are perhaps doing what you and I would do in their position, paying money to cross the channel for the chance of a better life. But we don't know who they are. They've not followed the rules. And in fact, they jumped the queue ahead of true refugees who may be deserving of our support. So the migrant hotels, a disaster, a waste of money and an impact on the community. Houses of multiple occupancy, illegal immigrants coming to a neighbourhood like yours. And then there is the third way, using civic infrastructure like disused army barracks or, for example, in Crowborough, a cadet training centre. Now, Crowborough has become another national scandal, as up to 500 men, undocumented, have been parachuted into this town in the dead of night to evade protesters, and it's drastically changed life for the locals from one day to the next. Kids are not left to their own devices if they're out and about anymore. And why would there be when there are 500 men whose backgrounds we don't know living a stone's throw away? This is insanity. It's costing billions of pounds a year. It's threatening the safety of our citizens. It's destroying social cohesion. It's unfair, it's un-British, and it's wrong. So the truth is that going from hotels to army barracks to HMOs is simply the rearranging of deck chairs on the Titanic. None of it's right. The migrant hotels are wrong. The HMOs are wrong. The army barracks and the cadet training centres are wrong. It's all wrong. And the real issue at the heart of this is supply. And almost 80,000 people having entered the country since Sir Keir Smash the Gang's Starmer achieved office. The border of this country is there for a reason. And if you can't police it, you're not a proper country at all. As we approach the 10-year anniversary of Brexit, the slogan was "Take back control." Well, we have lost it. The biggest issue right now, yes, we've got the economy. That's a disaster. It's in freefall, thanks to Rachel from Accounts, whose numbers don't add up. She's wedded to the failed ideology of socialism. Yes, we've got net zero and the highest energy costs in the developed world, the return of unemployment, particularly youth unemployment, the highest in Europe, which is going some, given that no one in Spain works. We are in big trouble. So we've got the economy, we've got the energy prices, we've got parallel communities and the total failure of the socialist multicultural experiment. But at the top of the list, the biggest problem we have, it's the boats, stupid. So let's save our homes for our people. Let's save our army barracks for the military. And let's save our hotels for Granny and her 80th birthday celebrations. I'll drink to that. 0344 499 1000, your reaction. Elliot has called the show. Good morning, Elliot.
Hello. Good morning.
Elliot,
yes.
I want to talk to you about uniting the right in just a moment, but your reaction to Dolan's dispatch, I think that the homes of multiple occupancy are arguably even worse than the migrant hotels.
I would agree with you entirely, and I think we have to step back and look at really what's happening here. It is a complete disgrace, in my opinion, and the people I speak to in all forms of, in all ethnicities and all
Correct.
professions.
This is not about skin colour.
Yes, there is a dark side of this government. There is something going on. It's been going on since the Mandelson-Blair years that want to change this country. There is a concerted policy to ruin this country and to bring it into some mad global environment that will allow these sort of people, this awful, disgusting quality of life, to ruin our heritage, our culture and our history. And because these people doing this dark side of this existing government, and Starmer himself, who are guilty of this traitorous act, they don't value our history, they don't value our culture, our heritage, and they don't value the people that have died for this country, Mark. And that means if that's your horrible, horrible way of thinking, these awful people, Starmer and Burnham, makes no difference. You cannot build for the future. There's no future at the moment with this country unless you get rid of these people who, in my opinion, completely treacherous to our way of life. They hate this country. They hate our culture, our values, and our strong democratic history.
Elliot, you've spoken very passionately. The bottom line is we need an economic, political and societal revolution. Elliot, brilliant call. What we're going for here, folks, is more than what they call change. That is the catchword of every election, isn't it? Because the issue that you've got is that, yes, every election there are incremental changes to the country. No. What we need to do now is bin the entire establishment. It's got to be total wipe the floor, get rid. And this is not just Labour, is it? It's the Lib Dems, it's the woke Tories, it is the progressive left who have infiltrated our public institutions, the media, and the political class. They've all shifted leftwards. And why? Because they are insulated from reality. What we need is migrant hotels and HMOs in Islington and Hampstead. That's what you need. The problem you've got, the consequences of these woke progressive policies are not felt by those who inflict them upon us. Maria's in Gloucestershire. Good morning, Maria.
Good morning. Sorry, I'm still a bit dodgy today. I'm not feeling very well.
Oh, Maria, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm very glad that you've called the show. What do you think about this idea of a deal on the right? Kemi, Nigel and Rupert sort things out.
I tell you what, would you be able to send me to Mars? Because to be honest with you, you know what I mean? That is never going to happen. I mean, this business about Restore and Ben Habib and all this blah, 2024, Ben Habib caused a lot of problems with the reform, and that's why they actually asked him to leave. 2025, Rupert Lowe was the same. He did all sorts of things that weren't very nice, and people keep going on about he's some kind of saint. You need to go on Facebook and talk to all the people on there who are saying, what the hell? It's not going to happen. Nobody even likes the men. They don't like either of them. And I mean, it's just not going to happen, is it? I mean, don't you find it really odd that before Makerfield came online, like, how often did you hear from Rupert Lowe? Seriously.
What are your objections to Rupert Lowe, Maria? Why do you back Nigel over Rupert?
Well, why? Because I have been following both of them. I followed Rupert Lowe when all the hassle went up in the air. I followed Ben Habib when all the hassle in 2024 went up in the air. And Rupert Lowe did do what they said he did. I mean, Zia Yusuf is not a liar, right? Whatever happened, happened, and I don't trust him. I will never trust the man, because before Makerfield, he wasn't even interested. He only started his group just before all this. Him and I think, personally, it might be the drugs I'm on at the moment, but listen, I think him and Ben Habib are working together on this, because I find it very, very odd. that suddenly we're going through all this with joining this and joining that and joining that. What would be the point? What would be the point? We have got...
So your argument, Maria, is that you can't do business with someone like Rupert Lowe?
Well, I couldn't personally, but then I'm not the problem, am I?
Why do you think Rupert has such support, Maria?
Such support? I can tell you, as that's what I'm saying. I go on Facebook, right, and I belong to reform, a lot of reform groups and stuff like that, and I talk to people. And he doesn't. You keep saying he's got all this support.
Well, he's got at least 8% in Makerfield. He's probably going to prevent Reform from winning that seat, Maria.
I'm not being funny, but yet the people are so easily led. They'll believe anything. They just can't get it around their head. They are so easily led. Either way.
Maria, we love it when you call the show. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, and I wish you well. You're not feeling great today. Maria's got a lot of health issues, but we love you loads, Maria, and I hope that you're going to be able to take care of yourself today. Maria faces a lot of health challenges, but we appreciate her thoughts because she's very articulate and she's all in with Nigel. Is she right? By the way, I can point out, as my producer Phil wanted me to stress, that would be medication. Drugs that she's on. Nothing more recreational than that. Engineer Dave is a different story altogether. Here's a voice note, if we can, from Jay.
Morning, guys. Great show. Do I think Reform should do a deal with the Conservatives? Absolutely not. They'll want too much. They'll want too much say. The lefties in the Conservatives that stopped people doing what they wanted to do with Rwanda and all the other bits and pieces. I know Labour were big players in that, but it just, no, absolutely not. Restore is a massive possibility. Yes, there's been a big fallout there, and it's going to be real hard to get, them together because of the conflict with sort of Zia Yusuf and Rupert Lowe. But if Rupert Lowe, he's self-made millionaire, doesn't need anything of anyone. But if that guy loves this flag, loves the country, and it comes to deadline day, and if they merge and that gives them power, as opposed to if you don't merge, the Greens, Labour are going to get power, then they've got to do it for the sake of the country. And I'm literally pleading for them to do it for the sake of my children and their grandchildren and everyone that goes with it.
Jay, I agree with every syllable. You've nailed it. I think that they must unite, otherwise we are over. 5 more years of a left-wing government, a rainbow coalition. Good luck. You are listening to Talk Breakfast. It's 9:20. Next up, the fearless Annunciata Rees-Mogg. Don't go anywhere.
The Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast 9:22. Should Rupert, Kemi and Nigel hammer out a deal to save Britain? Let's get the views of one of my favourite political commentators, Annunziata Rees-Mogg, Head of Communications for Popular Conservatism, former MEP. Good morning, Annunziata.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. Is it your expectation that the impact of Restore will deprive Reform of victory on Thursday?
I think, unfortunately, it is. And I think the Tories should have made a principled stand at the beginning and stood down. And that at this point, it's too late to change anything. The names are on the ballot paper, but splitting the vote on the right is going to hand not only Makerfield to Andy Burnham, but the Prime Ministership.
Well, I think that's a very fair assessment. Do you think this particular drama is unique to a by-election? And do you think when it came to a general election, right-wing voters will look at the odds of who is the next Prime Minister and perhaps support for Restore falls away?
I think the electorate are a lot cleverer than those in Westminster give them credit for, and that there will end up being a lot of tactical voting. There needs to be, because otherwise we will have the Rainbow Coalition of the left. We will have another 5 years of absolute socialist chaos that destroys the country. And I don't think we can take another 8 years. I think we were really in very serious long-term trouble if that happens. And I'm pretty sure the British people recognise that and will make their own decisions. But we've got to stop having this very public fighting between the parties on the right. There is so much upon which they agree, and I think they should focus more on what they agree on and stop the personality politics.
Well, you are so right, because Restore, Reform and the Conservatives 2.0 agree on most things, particularly given that Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, has shifted the party to the right. Annunziata, we're joined live on the line by Andrew in Dunstable. Good morning, Andrew. Welcome to Talk.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well. Delighted to have your cheery demeanour on the show. Do you fancy a deal? Would you like to see a coalition?
Well, I just said to Rory, I had a Zoom meeting with Ben on Friday because I was going to be a branch organiser for Advance UK, and then the announcement was made about the merger with GB Pack. Interesting conversations about, the Chagos Islands, that they'd got the injunction done. Just as an aside, they're going after Uber and all these meal delivery people that are employing migrants when they shouldn't be. And I just put it to him, I said, there's so many out there now on the right. Are we not cutting our own throats, so to speak, and letting somebody else in when we could possibly somehow get round a table? And he actually said these conversations are being had at the moment.
Well, this is very interesting. This is the mood music that I'm getting. You've had a Zoom meeting with Ben Habib, one of the biggest voices on the right.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
And I spoke to Ben yesterday, and he said a deal can be done on the right.
Yeah, that's what he was basically saying to me. He's now, because they're going GB Pack, he's now obviously not in the front as political as such, as a party. So he's not particularly fighting one corner. He's across all parties. I think it's a good process, GB Pack, as well, but he is adamant that the only way to do what needs to be done is to get round the table, is to talk and try and put the crazy things to the side and look at the core principle of what needs to be done to band it together. Yes, there's going to be disagreements. That's the grown-up way of doing things. Not everybody agrees, but he's keen, and he thinks conversations he's had already are the starting block for that to happen.
Andrew, thank you for your call. I'll let you get back to that busy household. And Annunziata, your reaction to what Andrew's had to say?
I think there are increasing numbers from all parties that see the reality that as much as one has party loyalty, as much as one wants to support just your own tribe, as it were, that the bigger picture is more important, that the future of our country is more important. I think there's a lot of realism creeping in. And I know amongst Tory backbenchers who are now much more of the right than the pathetic Theresa May types that used to be around, that they've got to concede some things in order to win some other things, because otherwise the left will sneak through the middle. I think it's quite important that some of this happens before the election, because the really crucial thing is that after the next election, the right has a very strong mandate for proper change. You mentioned in your dispatch, we can't have more of this just wishy-washy, a bit of change. We need fundamental change. We need a great restoration. We need constitutional change to reset our democracy.
I think we need to use the R word, don't we, Annunziata? Revolution.
A political revolution, yes, Mark.
Yeah, a peaceful political. But that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about tweaking here around the edges.
Exactly.
It's an overhaul.
And we need to undo so many harms that mainly go back to Tony Blair, some of Gordon Brown, but the Climate Change Act, the Equality Act, the Human Rights Act, the ECHR. These all are very big things that need to be undone for the future of our country, along with quangos, reforming the civil service. That requires a very big mandate from the British public in order to enact such monumental change. But without it, the country's in real trouble.
Annunziata, you're the head of communications for Popular Conservatism. When it comes to saving this country, do all roads now lead to Reform UK? Is that the vehicle for change?
As the polls stand, I think it is clear that Reform will win more seats than any other party. Things in politics do change, but this isn't so much about individuals. It is about the collective doing the best for the country. And whether the coalition of the right is led by Nigel Farage because he has won the most seats, which I think is the most likely outcome, or it's Kemi Badenoch, they've got to come to an agreement on what needs to change and how it needs to change. And the public need to know that before the election.
Most definitely. Annunziata, are you able to stay with us for a few minutes?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. That's great news, because I've got a full switchboard of people that want to speak to you. Plus, we've got another developing story. Nigel Farage this morning, in his brand new Substack column, has revealed that he will evict foreign nationals from social housing if he becomes Prime Minister. More reaction on that next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast at 9:31. Mark Dolan with you until 10 a.m. The excellent Alex Phillips is live thereafter. Nigel Farage has launched a brand new Substack, which is an online platform for journalism. He's going to do a monthly essay, and in today's essay, which has just dropped, he's revealed that he will evict foreign nationals from social housing. Let's get reaction from Annunziata Rees-Mogg, Head of Communications for Popular Conservatism and former MEP. Annunziata, what do you make of this policy?
I think aspects of it are very sensible and needed, and we need to see fairness in our system, and it doesn't feel fair that you can come over and immediately jump the queue to get social housing. I think there are difficulties with what he's also mentioned in this very long article about people with dual nationality and reducing their benefits, that you could be a British national who's married an American and you end up with dual nationality for family reasons. You're living here, you're suddenly a lesser person. I think it gets very difficult at that point, but it doesn't mean that the overriding principle isn't a sensible one.
And also, Annunziata, the Reform leader hasn't completely ruled out changing the settled status of former EU citizens. That is surely politically impossible and also wrong.
I think as soon as anyone has taken British citizenship, been granted British citizenship by our country, you can't undo that, that you can't have two levels of British citizenship. I think we should have been much more cautious on who we gave citizenship to. That's a long-term question, but I don't think you can undo it once it's been granted. The settled status is a different category. And I think we've again got to go back to Tony Blair. And he could have restricted who could come here when the accession countries, eight new countries joined the EU, and he said, everyone's welcome, we've got open borders. He didn't need to do that. He shouldn't have done that. And I think there are big questions over that. The problem, of course, now is that that is over 20 years ago. And people not only have had children here who have never known anything other than living in Britain, going to British schools, speaking English, getting jobs, going to university, being part of this country's fabric. And on the whole, they've settled here extremely well. I live very near to Boston, which had the highest population of Eastern Europeans in the country and the biggest vote to leave the EU in the country. But now you would barely know there was a difference. The culture fits, the language has been adopted. They're very much just part of the society and community in that area. And I think going back and undoing 20-year permissions is very difficult and pretty unpleasant.
Well, I agree. I mean, I just don't see how you can reverse the settled status of former EU citizens. As you said, if we had our time again, we wouldn't have opened our borders to the east, which laid the foundations, sowed the seeds of Brexit. But here we are. On the other hand, Annunziata, before I get to Robert in London, reversing the Boris wave, total priority.
Absolutely. Before they are granted permanent right to remain, we have to undo that. That is absolutely urgent. As the 5-year period, it not only needs extending, it needs to be case by case. And most of those people should never get long term.
Would you backdate the settled status of the Boris wave? Because I would.
Anyone who is not yet at 5 years, yes.
And not those who have been granted it?
I think, again, it's very difficult.
Because you're probably looking at a good, what, 600,000-700,000 people?
The big wave is still less than 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we're only just coming out of COVID and it hasn't started. And I think if you start it now, you haven't actually, it's not many people. You just make sure it starts urgently.
Right, fair enough. Annunziata, we're taking your calls, folks, 03444991000. Robert's in London. Good morning, Robert. You're live with Annunziata Rees-Mogg.
Good morning, all. Look, I disagree about a merger. And so you know, I realised the Tories were a failed party probably 15 years ago. And I sort of went into UKIP and I helped with the leave vote, and then I went to the Brexit Party. I was a parliamentary candidate. We were stood down because Farage put the fear of Corbyn running the country above his own personal ambition for his party, for his country. And then, of course, we were completely sort of lied to and cheated by the Tories. And what I realised over that time was they are never going to change as a party. Not until they're just not going to change. They will just lie and lie and lie, and they sound like reform when campaigning, but of course, as soon as they get into power, everything gets reversed. I personally, I'm at the point now where I think it would be better to have another 5 years of these crazies in power and completely crash the economy. I believe there will be a sterling crisis. Not too far away, actually. It may trigger an early election. But if you've got Tories who, half that party is still Wets or Liberal Democrats, they really are, and they still are, if you like, inoculated from, like you were saying earlier, their decisions don't impact them financially. You need to destroy everything. You need a reset. You can't, when you weed a garden, or you have to root out everything. And unfortunately, the Conservatives it's more dangerous than Labour in some ways, because it sounds like a Conservative party, but in its fundamental roots, it isn't.
What a brilliant call. Robert, thank you for your considered thoughts. Annunciata?
I do fundamentally disagree, and I completely understand Robert's point about the Tories taking a terrible direction. I left the Conservative Party under Theresa May, but I'd had serious concerns before that they were being very woolly, social worker Lib Dems and not sticking to Conservative principles at all. And that needed addressing. But I think they have changed genuinely under Kemi Badenoch. That if you look at every single candidate who stands at the next election has to sign up to leaving the ECHR. Well, the real woolies just won't do that. They will go, they will be gone. A huge number of the want-to-be left Lib Dems lost their seats at the last election, thank goodness. And I shouldn't, as a Conservative, celebrate Conservative politicians losing their seats, but I absolutely do. The party needs to refine its heart and soul, and I think under Kemi Badenoch it has. But the bigger picture remains that we need everyone on the right to defeat the left. The poison, the danger is so very real, so great, that I don't know that our country would survive in its current form.
Would you rather Kemi Badenoch or Nigel Farage were Prime Minister, Annunciata?
I returned to the Conservative Party. The Brexit Party didn't stand down in quite the way Robert described in 2019, and I thought that was a mistake. It should have supported people who wanted a proper Brexit, and it didn't. But I am now back in the Conservative Party. I would inevitably, therefore, want a Conservative government. My main thing is on the economic points, where they do differ. But I think socially, there's a cigarette paper between them, and the big picture's got to be what matters. And if in my constituency, I thought tactically voting for the Reform Party would mean it was more likely to get a right-wing outcome, I would seriously consider it.
Well, that's very interesting and very pragmatic. Dave is in Essex. Good morning, Dave. You're live with Annunciata Rees-Mogg.
Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, David.
Well, there should be a coalition of the right, because at all costs, this communist government we have now has to go. It has to be knocked into total oblivion. They are a danger. We've all seen it now with our defence. You know, what they want to spend on defence. They're just dangerous.
Well, I think you're right, Dave, and I think that's the bigger picture, isn't it, Annunciata? The risk, the threat of another 5 years of socialism.
If we have another 5 years, we've already got another 3 years, and there might be a sovereign debt crisis. There might be external factors that force an early general election. But let's say it goes full term. We've got another 3 years, and if we got another 5 years on top of that, but not even just of Labour, who are destroying the country, but with Greens, we're in really tricky situation. The coalition of the SNP, we would disintegrate the United Kingdom, we would destroy our economy, we would undermine every form of social fabric we understand. Our culture would be under very serious threat. I think after 8 years, we get to a point that we couldn't undo it. And that's what's got to be avoided.
Annunziata, your knowledge of the political scene is capacious. Do you think if Andy Burnham wins Makerfield and enters 10 Downing Street, we will get an election sooner rather than later?
Please don't vote for Christmas. And he has no need to. Should he morally? Yes, absolutely. Will he? I think it's very unlikely. There are 400 Labour backbenchers who are worried about losing their seats. We know that there's quite a number in the current cabinet who are facing losing their seats. He will be under a lot of pressure not to call a general election, and I think he'll avoid it. I mean, we're hearing rumours that he's already won the by-election. We're hearing rumours that he'll go to number 10 Downing Street on Monday and demand that Keir Starmer stands down. Keir Starmer says he won't. We're in for a Labour fight by the look of it, which will distract from running the country even more. But to be honest, the more distracted they are, the less harm they can do.
And it's likely that if Andy Burnham wins Makerfield, that he becomes Prime Minister by October?
Yes, I mean, it obviously depends on how Keir Starmer reacts. I don't think there's an appetite from anyone else in the Labour Party to challenge Andy Burnham. They are looking for a bloodless coronation. We saw in the Tories what a bloodless coronation does. You end up with someone like Theresa May, who could not have been worse for the party or the country if she'd tried.
Well, I think that's a damning but fair assessment. Just on the idea of a snap election, what about Nigel Farage's suggestion that some kind of economic crisis might provoke an election perhaps next year, Annunziata?
I think that is very plausible. We know that very serious people are warning that Britain might well have to go to the IMF. If Britain has to go to the IMF, a Labour government, a Labour Prime Minister is going to find it very, very hard to keep the confidence of his party, because the IMF will undoubtedly say you need to slash benefits and not just take 1% off, which is all that would have been needed to fund our military that they refused to do, but to be taking off billions. And I don't know that a Labour Prime Minister could survive the level of austerity, of very serious cuts that the IMF would impose. And I don't think we're far off that on the course we're on.
Whilst we have you, Annunziata, brilliant to have you back on the show. It's been far too long. Can I get your reaction to a vote that's happening in Switzerland today? They have in the region of 4 referenda a year, and this one is on a vote to cap the population size at 10 million. It's currently 9.1 million. A third of the population in Switzerland are overseas. And I spoke to a Swiss journalist earlier, and he said that Switzerland's story is typical of so many Western nations. Infrastructure overloaded, economy suffering, society divided, crime up as a result of high immigration. What do you think about the idea of a population cap?
I think those sorts of caps can be very difficult. Just being realistic about Switzerland, and a huge amount of people who apply for Swiss citizenship are million and billionaires, and they quite like having them as citizens, even if they don't live there, because they pay very small amounts of tax on very large amounts, which brings in a lot of money to Switzerland and actually benefits everyone. I mean, their average salary is 3 times ours here. It's even their minimum wage level salaries are double ours here. It's quite an extraordinary system, and I think they would find it very annoying for their own citizens if they found they were denying billionaires residency. However, they are very sensibly looking out for themselves. And the reason they have such a great quality of life is because they aren't completely swamped and overloaded with people who are not paying their own way. And I think that's absolutely reasonable decision for them to take. I also do quite like their referendum system, whereby they not only have these national ones a number of times a year, but local ones on how the different cantons, equivalent to our county councils, treat their residents. And it is a much more openly democratic system.
Annunziata, always a deep privilege to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your valuable time on a Sunday morning. Annunziata Rees-Mogg is the head of communications for Popular Conservatism and a former MEP. Should Nigel, Rupert and Kemi hammer out a deal to save Britain? 9:47, this is Talk Breakfast.
Is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Does the success of this weekend's Trooping the Colour demonstrate that Prince Harry is the redundant royal? Let's get the views of a very good friend of mine. Rupert Bell is Talk's royal correspondent. Good morning, Rupert.
Good morning, Mark.
Harry? Who's Harry?
Well, yes, and yesterday it was very noticeable that there was no Harry. It was a very small balcony parade, as it were, after the formalities of the Trooping of the Colour, which I had the privilege of attending. It was my old regiment that were trooping the colour. I think it's the first time that actually the reigning king has seen the Grenadier Guards, who are the first regiment of foot guards, part of the trooping the colour. So it was a significant day. And also what was quite interesting from a sort of staging point of view, on the dais was the king, there was also the Queen, but I think it was fairly significant that the Princess of Wales was also sitting on that dais to the left-hand side of the king. So I think, and that I think is the first time that she will have been seen in such a prominent position. So I think that was interesting. Meanwhile, her husband, Prince William, he was riding on horseback along with the Princess Royal and Prince Edward. So I think that was a significant, but it did highlight the sort of small element, the royal family. But then William does want a pared down royal family, and I think yesterday was an example of that.
Well, Rupert, that's a fascinating observation. The elevation of Catherine as a figure within the family and within the institution. What do you think motivated that promotion?
Well, I think, in a way, accepting that, you know, this role is going to be an increasingly significant part of her life. Now, yesterday, of course, her children were there. You know, it will come a time, of course, when her husband will be will be the lead man, as it were, when he becomes king. So, and her role will be similar to the one we saw from Queen Camilla yesterday. So I think that was significant. Also, from a PR perspective, we got glimpses of the children. We tend to get these staged managed occasions, of which this is a state occasion. So they come...
Bless you, bless you.
Come out and play their part in proceedings. So I think it was a very interesting one. There were 1,400 troops. There were one or two jokes going around saying, well, amongst the sort of people there, well, there is our armed forces today. There aren't too many others around the country, but because I think there were 1,400 troops on parade yesterday. And as you mentioned, there's also another parade going on in London as we speak. So I think it was quite an interesting dynamic yesterday with the sort of chattering classes amongst service personnel about what is going on with our defences of this country.
Most definitely, and let's hope that Vladimir Putin didn't notice that a large portion of our military personnel were in central London. Is there any sense, Rupert, that William and Catherine are being positioned as king and queen elect?
Well, I think by sheer nature of the situation, they are. And I think what it also shows is that increasingly it's not handing over the baton. That's not the point. What I'm saying is that the king and William sort of have to sort of understand what goes into the year when you become king. And this is a significant part of the year, the ceremonial side. And people might say, is it an anachronism? But I think yesterday, if you've seen a number of tourists who were there, it is a great sort of bit of UK PLC sort of promoting itself. And we do rely on the royal family's state occasions to do exactly that. And I think that was what was part of yesterday's, because not only the people who were, of which I was lucky enough to be privileged in the grandstands, but the people lining the mile, the thousands also waiting for that fly past to come past. So it is a big, significant promotional tool for London, and the impact the royal family play on that in driving tourism to this country.
Most definitely. It was a very proud moment for the nation. And what's your appraisal, Rupert, of the relationship between the king and his eldest son, William, at the moment? They've had their differences in the past. Are they now as close as ever?
I think by dint of the fact that the health issues that have surrounded not only the king and the Princess of Wales, I think it has brought the unit much closer. And we saw some pictures of that. The palace released some Instagram footage yesterday. There does seem to be an increasing bond between the two, because the king understands, you know, I suppose his own mortality when he was diagnosed with cancer was brought into question. But of course, he's now seems to be operating at full tilt and seems to be in good health at the moment. But I think it does sort of sharpen the mind. So I think it does mean, and the king has always said that he wants to leave the monarchy fit for purpose for his son when it is that time that he ascends to the throne. So I think it was interesting. But at the same time, of course, we get Harry peering out at the Knicks game of the NBA playoffs. So we've seen pictures of Meghan putting out pictures of her with her best friend's baby. And, you know, you think, well, she's happy to photograph that, but then with her children and all the social media things. So once again, they're trying to keep themselves relevant, while yesterday was the main purpose of the royal family. And actually, one or two people said to me yesterday, such a shame, because actually, you know, if they had stayed within the royal family, perhaps it would have given, you know, there would have been an extra dimension to it, and could see that where the future of the royal family lay. But Harry's made his bed, and I think he's trying to show, well, look, I'm having my best life. I'm off to an NBA playoff game, and that's what I wanted. I didn't want to have the shackles of the royal family constricting what I do. So that, I'm sure, was part of the hidden message of seeing him strutting into the game last night.
Well, Rupert, I think that's very perceptive of you, and it didn't have to be this way. As we discussed last week on the show, Rupert, if Megxit had been done correctly, then Harry and Meghan could have remained expat royals, couldn't they? Sorry, expat royals. You know, then they could have dipped in and out of these occasions. They could have gone to family weddings and maybe even made an appearance at the Trooping of the Colour. But those bridges have been burned. What do you think King Charles and his son William will make of Harry's very public trip, his visit to a Knicks game, a sports stadium, on this venerated occasion? Because the Sussexes don't do anything by accident, do they? It's all messaging, as you say.
No, and I think they'll go, here we go again. I think it'll be rolling eyes. You know, here we see he wasn't right in the front row. I think he got a ticket. Look, he lives over there, and if you can get a ticket, you know, why not? But again, the sort of PR element of it is clearly showing, look, I'm living my best life. You know, whatever you say, I'm happy with my choices. And I think that's the sort of overt message from yesterday.
So this is a flash of defiance from Harry.
Well, I think what we've seen all the time is this flash of defiance. We saw pictures a few weeks ago, 10 days or so ago, of him playing football with his son, released, you know, all these messaging. But at the heart of it, you see pictures of their children, yet they say we shouldn't have them on the social media. But then we got Meghan showing the face of a newborn baby, and you think, well, make up your mind. What do you want children to be? Not in social media invading these children's lives? Well, then you're helping to promote it. So this, I think, is the mixed messaging that comes out from the Sussexes is things that leave people confused. But yesterday, it was definitely a part of saying, look at me, I'm having fun.
And Rupert, I'm really glad you pointed that out, that Meghan supposedly wants to protect the privacy of her children with a heart emoji on the face or photographs from behind. Meanwhile,